Chapter 9:14. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. However, this was clearly an ordinary place. Did they really think that it was so easy to find the ultimate inheritance in this world? Did they really think that rare treasures were everywhere in this world? It was just like what the evil dragon had done in Cloud Immortal City. As long as they released a bait, countless people would flock over. In the end, they just felt that they were extremely lucky and would definitely encounter countless rare treasures. After all, their cultivation was somewhat heaven-defying to begin with. They had to fight for all their resources. Those who were timid could not become experts at all. A true expert did not fear the heavens or the earth. Their heads looked at the sky and their feet stepped on the earth. They could kill countless experts in the blink of an eye. They could treat everyone in the world as ants. Qin Yu was slightly interested. There were not many people around, so he could not know anything about this place. However, just based on what was revealed now, it was enough for him to go in and explore. It better be something that really interests me. Otherwise, I will definitely destroy this place. If it was useless, there was no need for it to exist. If it was just strange. If it stayed, it would only harm passers-by. He would just treat it as getting rid of evil for the people. As he stepped into the surroundings, the dense immortal energy seemed to become thicker, as if it had really become solid. However, he did not feel any comfortable aura. The deeper he went, the stronger the strange feeling became. It was as if all the treasures he wanted would appear as long as he reached the deepest part. What I want is the blood essence of the dragon race. Can you really give it to me? You also want this thing very much, right? You're just a monster. You sure talk big. Hurry up and show yourself. Qin Yu was not affected at all. He calmed down and walked in step by step. Every step was just right. There was no difference from the previous step. Just like that, he slowly and steadily walked inside. Suddenly, countless green liquid sprinkled down like raindrops. Qin Yu did not dodge. He allowed the green raindrops to fall on his body. An incomparably huge pitch-black creature suddenly rushed out, with a long horn on its head. The horn was facing Qin Yu's abdomen. It roared and rushed over. Great. Since you've appeared, I'll return all of these to you. It was obvious that the green liquid was not a good thing. However, when it landed on his body, it still made him untainted. He even collected all of the green juice. How did it land on his body? How did it land on this pitch-black beast? This is a poison that can instantly kill a celestial. How are you able to completely block it without suffering any damage? Because his body was a little clumsy, he couldn't run away after rushing out. He could only endure the poison that he threw out without being able to dodge. Sizzle. Ah, it hurts so much. This black monster's skin and flesh had been corroded, and the blood that flowed out was also black. Although his eyes were not pitch black, they were dark red and filled with brutality. I want you to pay for this. How dare you injure me to such an extent? He didn't even have time to make a move before he was already rolling on the ground in pain because of the intense poison. He couldn't even crawl up again. This poison was enough to make him lose all ability to move. However, before he died, he was unwilling to die so sullenly, so cowardly. Suddenly, a huge, pitch-black tail covered in scales appeared behind him. These scales helped to block a portion of his wounds, but it still didn't give him any chance to breathe. This was a poison that he had specially prepared. Even if he endured it, there was no way he could survive such a powerful poison. Moreover, he was facing Qin Yu, an enemy that he found particularly troublesome. He used a large amount, so now he was definitely going to die. Heavenly Void Teleportation Formation. The blood on his body strangely formed a huge pattern on the ground. And the process was extremely fast. It was so fast that no one could react at all. The huge Heavenly Void Teleportation Formation formed with blood-red blood was already completed. However, Qin Yu did not bother to search for this strange formation array. Instead, he stared at the extremely thick scales on his body. He was no stranger to these scales. The dragon man he met in the 1,000-deep demonic forest also had such scales, but the color was a little different. It seems that you are also related to the so-called black dragon god. He originally thought that it was only in Yi province. He didn't expect that the Black Dragon God had already infiltrated Tianju. But thinking about it, it made sense. Compared to other places, Tianju was even more chaotic. And they didn't have high requirements for their backgrounds. Subordinates of unknown origins like the Black Dragon God could easily sneak in. This time, the heavenly void teleportation formation bloomed with a blood-red light. It completely enveloped him. Qin Yu didn't want to take the risk before he figured out the power of this formation. He was ready to retreat. But that pitch-black monster. It had already seen through his movements. In order to speed up the formation's completion, he didn't even hesitate to use most of his strength and flesh. Even if he wanted to recover later, it would be extremely difficult. But he wasn't willing to stop here. Since he had already drawn the array, he had to complete it. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't take this lying down. You want to run? Impossible. That's why I sacrificed 80% of my strength and body. Let the heavenly void teleportation formation be completed. The black monster suddenly let out a blood-curdling screech. Large chunks of flesh fell from its body. It formed a huge pool of blood on the ground. Qin Yu suddenly noticed that there was a flash of light on that side. One-Eyed couldn't help but scream. Isn't that the legendary primordial spirit seed? I didn't expect this legendary thing to really exist. I have to get this thing in my hands, otherwise I won't be able to rest easy. Oh my god, there's more than one of these treasures. Some of them have already reached 10,000 years old. A 10,000-year-old primordial spirit seed was enough to rebuild a stronger body. Whether you were a genius or a waste, this primordial spirit seed could make you reborn. Cleansing your muscles and marrow was a small matter. This thing could really change your body's flesh, blood, bones, and even the blood vessels in your body into the most supreme state. It could be said that with this cultivation, the speed of advancement would increase by more than 10 times. Chapter 9:15. You should have been able to ascend within 100 years or so. With this, you might even be able to step into a higher realm in less than 10 years. It was for this reason that the Grand Supreme God Seed had always been a treasure that everyone fought over. As long as there was even the slightest trace of it, it would be snatched up by everyone. Therefore, there were very few Grand Supreme God Seeds that could reach a certain age. Most of them were specially nurtured by someone. But at this point, who could care so much? Without the black monster, he suddenly opened his eyes wide and struggled to let out a roar. But for him now, it was too much for him to make such an action. He had already memorized most of his strength and the flesh on his body. At this point, he could not exert any strength at all. Plus, the one-eyed man simply took it and ran. Even he could not do anything about it. Just as the one-eyed man came back with the item, the entire formation was finally completed. Its power had also reached its peak. The blood-red light shone brightly, and countless pitch-black shadows seemed to be floating around them. For a moment, countless ghostly wails and screams rang in their ears. It was ear-piercing and made one's mind chaotic. This sound is not bad. But it's a little too unpleasant. It should have some effect on other people. It was not enough to deal with him. When all the illusions in front of them disappeared without a trace, they were in another place. The sky here was blood-red, and the ground beneath their feet was pitch-black. Even the plants that grew on it were constantly emitting an ominous aura. Only a plant not far in front of them was emitting a blood-red light. The thick smell of blood on it was almost overflowing. The color was bright and full, as if it was formed entirely from blood droplets. Ha 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 ha, this is the Dark Realm. After coming to our territory, you people from the Immortal Realm will be greatly weakened. Only a very small number of people who can restrain the power of the Dark Realm will not be weakened. And your strength must be strong to a certain extent. The people of the Immortal Realm were not willing to step into this world. In the entire Ninefold God Realm, the Dark Realm was the place that people looked down on the most. It was also the place that people hated the most. Because this place was linked to evil and the suffering of people. It was as long as people from the Dark World appeared, the world would be thrown into chaos and countless people would be plunged into misery and suffering. Qin Yu had long felt that the Black Dragon God should be here. Now, it was only his guess that had been confirmed. However, with just this guy's strength, with an identity that he couldn't see clearly, he was able to construct a passageway between the two realms. This really surprised him. But thinking about it carefully, it didn't seem to be surprising. These guys had all used various methods to forcibly borrow the power of the Black Dragon God. If it was someone at the level of the Black Dragon God, then he would still be a little wary. But just like this pitch-black monster, he didn't care about it at all. Then I'm sorry to disappoint you. It just so happens that I'm the one who fulfills the conditions you mentioned. Actually, I'm not too sure if I meet these conditions, but my strength doesn't seem to be affected. Another divine thunder appeared in Qin Yu's hand. This time, it was only as thick as a pinky. However, he was able to easily defeat the one who was already heavily injured. The monster whose entire body was pitch black and whose bloodline was mixed was smashed into countless powder. Sure enough, the power in his body was still the same as before. He didn't feel the suppression of the guy's power at all. Not only did he not feel that his power was suppressed, but he also felt unprecedentedly comfortable. However, he was more or less disgusted by the aura here. He didn't really like such oppressive colors. Then let me change the world. Since you don't like it, then I'll destroy all of this and inject new colors. Qin Yu's hands transformed into dragon claws. His Azure Dragon secret art had already made great progress. If he cultivated it to the end, he would be able to obtain the blessing of the entire Azure Dragon clan. Now, he had only used half of his strength, and it was enough to shatter the mountains and rivers and change the color of the world. The Dark Realm seemed to be easier to shatter. It wasn't as solid as the immortal world. After the mountains and rivers shattered, it quickly caused a change in the terrain. Countless high mountains turned into flat ground. Small rivers turned into a sea. Countless plants let out strange screams and withered. At the same time, many corpses gradually appeared in the water. All of them were covered in blood. The layer of dark clouds in the sky that disgusted him was also directly dispersed by him, revealing the clear red moon in the sky. For a moment, the mountains and rivers shattered, and the world changed color. Such a big movement attracted the attention of many experts. What kind of almighty person is doing this? With such powerful strength, could it be that he is a person under the Dragon God? But although those guys are very powerful, they have always been busy with all kinds of strange things. They wouldn't do this at all. Instead, it looks like they are just doing it according to their hearts. Doing it according to their hearts, what a good doing it according to their heart. But this movement is really a bit too big. After Qin Yu finished all this, he retracted his hand in satisfaction. But that pair of dragon claws that flashed by made people even more certain that this matter should be related to the Dark Dragon God. Those guys were all lunatics. They so-called inherited the will of the Dragon God, but they did a lot of things that they couldn't understand. Perhaps this time was one of them. With such a thought, someone took the initiative to leave. There was no point in continuing to stay. However, the person who suggested leaving first only turned around and stood guard in another position. He had once dealt with the people of the Dark Dragon God, so he naturally knew that the so-called Dark Dragon God was a black dragon. Most of the other people who had the bloodline of the Dark Dragon God were mainly black and blood-colored. They didn't have such dark golden scales at all. So he dared to conclude that this was not a person of the Dark Dragon God. And with such a powerful expert in the Dark Realm, he had to take a good look at it. At the very least, he had to know who it was. If only I could see how strong he is and find out where he came from. It just so happens that I can use this to cheat some things. I know a lot of things. Even if I don't know anything, he won't be able to find out who I am. This kind of thing has been successful hundreds of times. Even if he is a strong person, he will still be fooled by me. As soon as he finished speaking, Qin Yu also appeared behind him. Chapter 9:16. What a good person to be fooled by him. He didn't know if the powerful people here were too stupid. But this guy's deception was very good. He could easily deceive everyone and make them believe him without a doubt. I'm right here. What are you going to say to me? If what you say doesn't satisfy me, I'll slap you to death immediately. The person who was talking to himself suddenly shuddered. He couldn't help but turn his head stiffly. He didn't expect that the person was right behind him. Originally, he thought that he might be able to gain a lot this time. But now, everything was ruined. Because he was accidentally discovered this time, he had to say something to save his life. What should he say? Got it. He began to turn his head and carefully sized up Qin Yu. He looked at every detail of his body. But no matter how he looked, he couldn't find any flaws. He couldn't find any weaknesses either. The only thing he could see was that his strength and temperament must be very strong. All of a sudden, he blurted out, "Sir, are you looking for someone? If you want to find someone, you can ask me. Although I don't know much, I can still deceive. Bah. I still have a group of friends to ask. My friends are not all over the world, but they are everywhere." He did everything he could to defend himself, and he also did everything he could to save his own life. Although this method was slightly inappropriate at this time, he had no other way. Qin Yu couldn't help but laugh. It wasn't because this guy guessed what he was going to do, but because of his attitude. Just now, he said how to deceive. If he didn't know, then he would just talk nonsense. But now, he changed his words very quickly. He even said that his friends were all over the world. He didn't believe a single word. It was even more impossible for him to reveal this to him. "Tell me where the Dark Dragon God is. I'm going to look for him to catch up." Midsummer was stunned. Could it be that he had guessed wrong from the beginning to the end? Qin Yu was the Dark Dragon God's man. And he knew the Dark Dragon God. Otherwise, how could he explain this matter? Apart from this possibility, the other possibilities were minuscule. He was indeed prepared to find the Black Dragon God to reminisce about the past. As for the previous matter, it was time to settle the score. Since they were already here, they couldn't just leave. Since they came from his subordinates, they had to find a way out from there. No other place could send him back to where he came from. He didn't need to go anywhere else, as long as he could return to Tianju. Naturally, he had to return the same way he came. The Darkness Shrine has always been rather secretive. Although they have built up a large force, they have never exposed their true purpose. No one knows why they are doing this, but some people heard that the Black Dragon God wants to revive someone. Of course, such a heaven-defying move would never succeed. That's why it was targeted. Midsummer tried to sound out his true thoughts about the Black Dragon God, but he didn't get any information. Qin Yu's eyes were always indifferent, as if he didn't care about these things. Even he was dispensable. If he hadn't taken the initiative to approach, he wouldn't have been caught. Because it seemed that this powerhouse was not only young, but he also didn't seem to want to cause trouble. It was as if the way he casually changed the world was just for a moment of pleasure. Because he wanted to do it, he did it. Thinking of this, he directly asked, "Why did you cause such a big commotion before? Could it be just for a moment of pleasure?" After saying that, he couldn't help but laugh. How was that possible? If such a huge commotion was just because he wanted to do it, then how reckless would this person be? Since he was born in this world, he would definitely be bound by this world. Born as a human, he had both wisdom and complicated thoughts. He had never seen such a pure person, so he also thought that such a pure person who did what he wanted didn't exist. But he got an answer that surprised him. There was no answer. However, it seemed to make sense. The difference in strength between the two of them was too obvious. "Show me the way." Midsummer didn't ask why, because his previous experience had already told him that even if he asked, he might not get any results. No matter what. It was better for him not to ask. The less he knew, the easier it was to survive. This was the unchanging truth in the entire Dark Realm. It just so happened that there was a Dark Dragon Temple in the nearby city. There were many places like that, but it was a relatively good place. There were many believers in it, and many people would go there to worship. Worship. Qin Yu remembered that pious look he had seen before and couldn't help but laugh. If it was really as he thought, maybe he could get another drop of blood essence without looking for any dragons. Relatively speaking, the blood essence of the Dark Dragon God was much stronger than the blood essence of other dragons. He seemed to want the power of faith and a huge amount of vitality. It was just that these were all positive forces, which were incompatible with this dark world. Why did he want these? 2 streams of light flashed by, and the 2 of them landed in the city. There were no procedures to enter the city, and it was very chaotic. As long as you had the strength, you could enter and leave at will. Even if you killed someone on the spot, no one would care. It was precisely because of this that Qin Yu was able to enter this place effortlessly. It's in front, but now is not the time to gather together. If you want to see the situation, I'm afraid you'll have to wait. I wonder if I can leave now. I've already brought you here. Qin Yu didn't seem to hear these words. But the dragon soul next to him glanced at him. Just this glance made his soul tremble. He couldn't say a word about leaving anymore. He was convinced, wasn't it? But he more or less had some doubts in his heart. This powerhouse didn't seem to be very strong. He shouldn't say that. His strength was indeed very strong, but his realm didn't seem to be very high. But he didn't dare to ask. Was his perception right, or the powerhouse deliberately restrained his strength to not let others see through it? He felt that the latter was more likely, but he had to admit that the former was also possible. An extremely absurd and even terrifying thought arose in his mind. What if he was just deceived? Perhaps the previous dragon powerhouse wasn't Qin Yu. After all, he saw a huge claw. Looking at Qin Yu again, although there was a bit of the aura of a powerhouse on his body. But he had never seen him make a move. Chapter 9:17. Sir, may I know what realm your strength has reached? The people of the Dark Realm had always been flexible. They were extremely ruthless when killing people. And when it was time to lower their heads, they were more lackeys than anyone else. At this moment, his face was full of smiles. His face was full of wrinkles. His eyes were full of flattery, and his hands were also very pleasing to the eye. Why don't you try it yourself? Zhong Xia instantly retracted his head. He wasn't stupid, so of course he wouldn't do such a thing. Although he wasn't sure if Qin Yu was the owner of the flashing dragon claw. But at least he wasn't an easy person to get along with. At present, what he wanted to do the most was to leave this place as soon as possible. The Dark Dragon Palace was still the same as before. There was a huge statue in the middle, and a few pieces of cloth were spread on the ground. It was just that there were fewer people here. Only when he really came here did he know why the Dark Dragon God always wanted to expand to other places. Because in the entire Dark Realm, there weren't many people who could have faith. They all respected strength, and what they pursued was strength. If the Dark Dragon God wasn't a strong person himself, he wouldn't even have so many believers. Actually, the number of people here is already quite a lot. After all, there will be a lot of people here every time. By then, the entire hall will be half full. However, Qin Yu knew that in the other places, every single time, they would be filled to the brim. Even the places outside would be occupied by countless people just to get closer to this statue. That was already an extremely crazy attitude. No blood essence. It seems that it should be a very special place to have blood essence. Perhaps the depths of the abyss had been rebuilt. He must go and take a look someday. It was like revisiting an old place. Master, that guy slipped away when you turned your head and went into the crowd. Should I catch him and teach him a lesson? Qin Yu shook his head. There was no need for that. If he wanted to run, he couldn't keep him. His heart wasn't there anymore. If he forced him to stay and caused him to say something wrong, wouldn't that be misleading? Now that he had found the city, there should be a lot of places to sell information. As long as the price was high enough, what kind of information couldn't they buy? Furthermore, he was even more reliable than him. There's nothing useful here. Qin Yu felt that it was a pity, but he didn't stay here any longer. It seemed that the Dark Dragon God was weaker than he had imagined. Not even a single drop of essence blood could be found in each temple. Far away in the depths of the abyss, the endless darkness brought about an extremely oppressive aura. The pitch-black scales merged with the darkness. Only the glimmer of light at the end of his eyes showed how powerful the existence here was. Why do I feel a familiar aura? Xian Jiao is dead. Who did it? How dare you kill my men? This is already the second time in a short period of time. Two of his most important subordinates in the immortal world were dead. Speaking of the previous one, it was fine. It couldn't provide him with too many offerings. It was just a matter of time. But this time, the one who died was his trusted subordinate. Tianju was a chaotic place, and many people often went missing. Murder and robbery were common occurrences. Therefore, it could be said that the people he sent there could easily obtain a very rich harvest. Therefore, they were valued by him. Now that they were dead, it would be quite difficult for him to arrange for new people. A powerful will suddenly descended. Qin Yu's head hurt slightly. He snorted coldly, "Get out. I am the great dark dragon god. Who are you? How dare you hurt my men? I am someone that you can never afford to provoke." After Qin Yu finished saying those words, he immediately drove away that strand of awareness. How could it be so easy to enter his mind and control his will? As for how much pressure his casual words brought to the Black Dragon God, how much suspicion it would cause him to have. All of this had nothing to do with him, because the distance was too far. But he should be able to find him soon. After he came into close contact with the so-called Dark Dragon God, he realized that he was just SOSO. The distant and boundless aura seemed to be very similar to the aura on Huarong's body. He should only be in the Saint King realm. At least he hasn't surpassed this realm yet. This way, it would be much easier to deal with. If he had surpassed the Saint King realm, he might have considered it. But now that he had confirmed the strength of his opponent, he could also go directly to the door and didn't have to start from the people below. I want to find the location of the Dark Dragon God. Qin Yu casually put on a thick cloak. His voice was slightly lowered, sounding hoarse and old, as if it was the voice of an old man. But whether it was his appearance or voice, they were unreliable in the dark realm. Because there were too many ways to change. As soon as these words came out, those people were so scared that they trembled all over. That was the legendary Dark Dragon God. Who would dare to inquire about it? Of course, they still had some information in their hands. But in the end, they still refused. They couldn't afford to provoke him. "I won't ask who you are, but that is a legendary expert. We can't reveal it. If we dare to say it, we will definitely be slaughtered when the time comes. Please change to another place. I really don't have any information on my side." After a few more places, almost all of them said the same thing. Whether it was begging bitterly or their expressions changing drastically, they insisted that there was no information at all. They all had one thing in common, and that was that they weren't willing to say anything about the Dark Dragon God. Qin Yu wasn't angry. This was something to be expected. It wasn't until he walked to an extremely dilapidated place that someone answered his question. It seemed that this place was about to collapse. There were spider webs everywhere. As for the steward, he was playing with a pen in boredom. Seeing that there were guests coming over, he became slightly more energetic. After hearing what he said, his eyes lit up. "If you want to get the location of the Dark Dragon God, it's not very difficult, but the price, after all, that's a strong person. Ordinary people aren't willing to provoke him. Only a desperado like me is willing to risk my life for money. If I'm not wrong, you should have asked elsewhere, right?" Qin Yu directly took out all the things he had on him. Except for a part that wasn't easy to take out. Those things that were useless to him and could be used as currency were all taken out. It filled half of the room. Chapter 9:18. The young man's eyes lit up. However, he didn't seem to care and looked around in disdain. "It's not that good. It's just a supplement. If you add them all together, you can get the information you want." Although these things were of no use to him, he was never a fool who would be ruthlessly taken advantage of. Only the immortal world had these things. It was just a piece of information. Even if it was valuable, how valuable could it be? Moreover, this person's eyes had never left the pile of things he had taken out from the beginning to the end. From this, it could be seen that he was simply spouting nonsense with a straight face. "I suddenly don't want to know where the Dark Dragon is. After all, with my strength, it's very risky to find him now. It seems that I need to use these things to increase my strength in exchange for resources. Then, I'll ask around." Duhai immediately stopped him. He hadn't had any business for a long time. If he missed such a big business this time, he would have to starve for a long time. Originally, he wanted to see if he could extort some money. Now, it seemed that it was impossible. After that, he collected hundreds of immortal crystals. There was also a portion of precious materials. It was his reward for the information. Many people knew where the Dark Dragon God was, but no one dared to go there. That was the headquarters of the Dark Dragon God Palace. Countless experts who were forcibly trained were stationed there. They would always see the Dark Dragon God as the only true God. They would never betray him. Even death was not their final destination. Those people seemed to think that after they died, they would be able to repay the Dark Dragon God's kindness to them. Therefore, if they really fought, they didn't fear death at all. Sometimes, if they were really angry, they could even use their own bodies to achieve some goals. Using their own bodies as the price. It seems that the void teleportation formation was like that. No wonder he could forcefully bring me here with his weak strength. Of course, there were many disadvantages. If he wanted to avoid it, it wasn't completely impossible. If he didn't sacrifice most of his strength and flesh in the end, he wouldn't have been able to complete the formation before Qin Yu left. Therefore, there were many drawbacks. Even though he had used such a cruel method to forcefully obtain such great power. However, it was not completely under his control. Du Hai's ears twitched slightly. A shrewd person like him had long noticed that something was wrong. Qin Yu did not look like someone from the dark world at all. Instead, he looked like someone from the legendary immortal world. Just his bearing alone was open and aboveboard, and his words and actions were never sloppy. Whatever he said was the truth. There was no need to beat around the bush. In the dark world, there were countless fights, both open and covert. Everyone grew up after going through all kinds of dark things. Therefore, more or less, their bodies would be tainted with some dark aura. This was also a characteristic of the dark realm. But he didn't see it on Qin Yu. However, even if they were from another god realm, they would still be able to do so. What did it have to do with him? Every single one of these things that came from other divine realms was priceless and could be called a precious treasure. After all, the passage between the two sessions was too difficult to connect. Even an expert would have to pay a hefty price if he wanted to forcefully open a passage. It was precisely because of this that these things were extremely novel. In fact, he had already received 100 times the reward. Previously, he had opened his mouth wide because he was blinded by money and benefits. Now, the money and goods were settled. Du Hai returned to his original appearance. Those complicated things had nothing to do with him. Qin Yu finally got the information he wanted. He was about to leave the door when his footsteps suddenly paused. He took another look at Du Hai, who was sitting in the messy room, bored to death. Finally, his gaze stopped on his hair. Remember to make it more realistic next time. Also, the scar on your head is exposed. The pen in Du Hai's hand was shaking non-stop. Suddenly, it fell to the ground with a thud. But he didn't care about his beloved pen at all. He rushed out with a whoosh and touched his hair with both hands in a panic. After a long time, he remembered that he should first check if his hair was crooked. Sure enough, upon closer inspection, his hair was only messed up by himself. How could there be any scar on his head? But there was no sign of Qin Yu in his small shop. How on earth did he find out? It would have been fine if he had accidentally given himself away, but he clearly hadn't done so. The Tao he cultivated was different from the great Tao of the world. The reason why he appeared in this world. He also had his own purpose. He was deliberately hiding his identity. After all, he still had a secret mission on him. But all the people in his sect had their hair cut off. And they used a special method to make it so that it would never grow again. He had to wear a wig and use many methods to make it look extremely realistic. Countless experts had glanced at him, but they didn't find any clues. He even came into contact with all kinds of people, but he didn't expose himself. Doubts arose in Du Hai's mind. Under such a perfect disguise, how did Qin Yu find him? If he can see through all disguises, isn't this ability too heaven-defying? Maybe he can help with the thing that is going to happen later. Unfortunately, when he wanted to go out to look for that person, He couldn't find that person anywhere. It was as if everything before was just his own illusion. There was no one who dared to look for the dark dragon god, and no one saw through his disguise. All of this was just his imagination. But the things that were piled up like a small mountain proved to him that there was indeed such a mysterious person just now. Not only did he have a lot of wealth, he also had an extremely magical ability that shocked him. Qin Yu was preparing to go to Myriad Dragon Mountain. That was the true headquarters of the Dark Dragon God, and also the core of the other party. But no one knew the exact location of the Dark Dragon God. I want to go to Myriad Dragon Mountain. Qin Yu was now holding the normal money that he could use in the Dark Realm that he had just exchanged from Du Hai. They were pieces of sparkling white bones, and according to their quality, they had different positions and represented different values. The blood in his hands was of the highest grade. It looked like a translucent, high-quality jade. Chapter 919. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. These were jade bone coins. Looking at the small pile of jade bone coins, even though they were quite afraid, there were still people who stood out. There were bound to be brave men when there was a great reward. There were also people who knew the way to Myriad Dragon Mountain. This is just the deposit. As soon as the voice fell, more people stood out. Just now, they were avoiding it, but now it was a good job that everyone was fighting for. After all, they were not going to be sent inside, but only to the periphery. The risk was greatly reduced. In addition, with such a high reward, it was worth it even if they risked their lives. My ride is very wide. It's stable and comfortable to sit in. Moreover, the flames around my body always bring warmth. Your flying speed is as slow as a planet, and you still have the face to say that. Look, my speed is extremely fast. I guarantee that I'll be there in half a day. It's so uncomfortable for you to sit here and wonder. Look, my ride is comfortable and fast. It's not worse than the two of them. However, among this group of people who were fighting for it, only one was the most special. He only calmly described his ability. It was not too outstanding, but he was the calmest among all of them. He also looked the most miserable. Such a miserable person could actually have such an outstanding flying device. He could not help but take a few more glances. If he was only pursuing speed or comfort, why didn't he just call along? Therefore, these two were not the fundamental reasons that made him make the decision in the end. It was nothing more than fate. Whoever he was interested in would be the final candidate. It's you. I want to go as fast as I can. I'll give you half a day. He did not expect it to be him. However, surprise and astonishment only appeared on his face for a moment. Soon, he completely calmed down. He was quite indifferent. However, the others cast envious and jealous gazes at him. Usually, he did not do anything. No one paid attention to him because he did not compete or snatch. But now, it seemed that it was not that he did not compete or snatch, but that he used a higher method to compete. Now that he had attracted the attention of a customer and accepted such a big deal, he would not have to worry about food and drink for half a year. This kid's luck is really too good. Why didn't I be more rational just now and show that I'm different from the rest? I didn't expect this honest-looking guy to be so cunning. He seemed to be used to all kinds of comments. The lucky one who was chosen didn't have any expression on his face. It was as if everyone around him was just a mass of air. The person being targeted was not him, but a stranger he did not know at all. His speed was very fast, and he didn't say a word of nonsense. After a while, he came over directly. He was still wearing the same set of clothes as before. He didn't bring anything extra with him, so he didn't seem to have changed much. However, he was stepping on something that looked like a blanket. There was a thin layer of transparent barrier that was hard to discover. I don't have anything to pack. If you're in a hurry, you can leave now. This was a straightforward and direct method, without the slightest bit of sloppiness or bargaining. There was probably only one person present who could do it. The others more or less had their own thoughts. Perhaps it was for money, or perhaps it was to find out how much money he had on him. Perhaps they could also get a share of the loot. Wasn't it easy to kill someone and rob them? On this seemingly ordinary blanket. There were more than a dozen formations engraved on it. Some were used to speed up, some were used to fly in the air, some were used to block wind and rain, and there were even self-cleaning ones. These formations were all basic and ordinary, but when all of them were accumulated together, they could play a lot of roles. So much so that this ordinary blanket could be called a good tool. My name is Jiao Yi. If there's anything, just call me. A strange name, a strange person. If he didn't come from some secret organization, then he had some stories. How much do you know about Myriad Dragon Mountain? Although Qin Yu was going to find the Dark Dragon God, he really didn't inquire much about what kind of existence the Dark Dragon God was. At least for the ordinary information, he didn't think it was of much significance. Jiao Yi didn't ask why. He told him all the legends about the Dark Dragon God that he knew, which were the most widely spread. Some of it was speculation, and some of it was the truth. But this required them to slowly distinguish it. When the truth and the lies were mixed together, no one knew how much was true and how much was false. According to the legends, the Dark Dragon God seemed to have reached the realm of a true god. He was recognized as the strongest expert, even stronger than Senzun. There were very few true gods in this world. It had been a very, very long time since the last time it had appeared. Once one appeared, he could soar in the 9 realms, and several people would worship him wherever he went. Even if it was just a breath, it could make them explode and die on the spot. It was a pity that such a legendary existence hadn't appeared in the 9 abstinences for a long time. Even Senzun was very rare, so where could they find a real true god? Senzun was already unparalleled in the world, and he could even sit on the seat of the master of a realm. Not to mention a higher realm, he would have become a pile of dust and no longer existed. He is indeed not a true god, just a saint king. Even such a statement came out. It seems that you really know very little about him. Even he could feel that the Dark Dragon God was at most a saint king, and there was no higher realm. Other people still thought that perhaps the Dark Dragon God was a true god in the legends. They heard that the Dark Dragon God's subordinates believed this without a doubt, but they didn't know what would happen if they found out that the so-called true god they believed in was actually just a saint king. At that time, how interesting would their expressions be? Although he was still an extremely powerful saint king, there was still a huge gap between him and a true god. This could already be considered a deception. No one knows, but it came from the mouths of some experts, Yi Futian said. It's better to believe this kind of thing than not. There is no such thing as a groundless rumor in this world. This was the reason why no one was willing to go. If it was only a saint king, then they dared to take the risk. After all, they didn't do anything but send people off and earn a hard-earned sum of money. Speaking of which, it wasn't wrong. But if it was true God realm, who knew whether or not they would directly kill them without distinguishing between right and wrong? At that time, no matter how many life-saving things they had on them, they wouldn't be able to escape. This was the difference in strength. Chapter 920. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The incomparably dark mountain peak soared into the sky, and the top of the mountain disappeared into the clouds. It was barren below, and not a single blade of grass grew. There wasn't any path around them that they could use to climb. It was surrounded by 3 extremely smooth stone walls. Even if one wanted to climb to the top of the mountain, it would not be easy. Ordinary things wouldn't be able to reach such a high place, unless it was an extremely powerful expert. Or there was some special power that could reach the top of the mountain. He saw the scenery hidden under the clouds. When he reached the foot of the mountain, Jiao Yi stopped in the distance. The front was no longer a place where he could go. Now he was not willing to move forward even an inch. If he moved forward a little bit, even if it was just an inch, he would be attacked. Under such a powerful attack, he would definitely be seriously injured. Qin Yu looked at the blanket that was stuck at a critical point. He smiled slightly. He directly jumped down and stood firmly on the ground. He did not know if it was a coincidence or something else, but he also happened to stand at a critical point. As long as he moved forward a little bit, he would immediately be attacked. Otherwise, he would be safe. Do you know a bald man called Duhai? When you go back, help me say hello to him. Then he suddenly disappeared. Jiao Yi was shocked, but he could not find that aura anywhere. It seemed that he had come alone. Suddenly, an extremely powerful and domineering aura directly crushed him and slammed him to the ground. Before he fainted, he only saw a flash of black scales. It was an expert under the Black Dragon God. Before the wind passed, he was not shocked by why he was suddenly attacked by an expert, but thinking. Sure enough, those who dared to come to the Black Dragon God were not simple people. He was careless. That was the so-called A, B, and I. He had remained so indifferent from the beginning to the end, not because he had no other thoughts, but because he knew what he had to do and what he had to do from the beginning to the end. So he was not in a hurry at all. Since he dared to lure me here, then let him bear the consequences of his actions, Izuchen said. Chinyu felt that something was wrong when he stopped just now. He had seen many powerful formations in his life. Furthermore, he had personally created countless powerful spirit formations. Naturally, he would recognize that there was an extremely powerful spirit formation there. If it was triggered, it would alert the experts. Looking at Jiao Yi and Yi Yi's appearance, it was obvious that the person who had been lured here was not a simple person. This was to use him, an outsider who came to find the Dark Dragon God, as bait to lure out a certain existence. In such a chaotic place, it was already merciful of him not to see blood on the spot. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. He did not know the other party's plan, but he had let Jiao Yi take the position that Jiao Yi wanted him to take. Perhaps this was the cycle of karma. However, not every place had such a powerful array formation. Chinyu rapidly circled around the entire foot of the mountain. Very soon, he discovered a weak point. With a slash of his sword, he cut open the void and entered it. When he reappeared, he was already in the clouds. There were already people patrolling the area slightly higher. Because the distance was relatively close, Chinyu hid his figure with the help of the clouds. He could just hear the conversation over there. Recently, a few other snobs have been a little restless. They still want to devour our Dark Dragon God Temple, but they don't even think about whether they have the ability to do so. That's right. As long as the Lord Dragon God makes a move, won't they all turn into a pile of yellow soil and no one will remember them? It's only because the Lord Dragon God is merciful that he didn't directly go over and destroy them all. They moved away a little. It just happened to reveal a gap for a moment. A dark grey shadow flashed by and quickly disappeared. It was so fast that it was like a blur. There was indeed something strange on this mountain peak. Just by looking at the vast space, it did not look like a small mountain peak hidden in the clouds. Instead, it looked like a piece of flat land. Such a transformation power could already be said to be miraculous. It could not be achieved unless one was extremely powerful and had precise control. However, it was no different from what he had imagined. This was most of the people in the Dark Dragon God Temple. They all thought that the Dark Dragon God already had the strength of a true god. There were patrolling teams everywhere. It took him a lot of effort to avoid these teams. Until finally, he stood in front of a vast gate. This gate was very different from the other gates. What made him stop was the appearance of this gate. It looked almost exactly the same as the black gate in the mountain area that someone had summoned in the lower realm. At that time, something wanted to break through the gate. However, it did not absorb enough power to open the gate. Then, it was completely destroyed by him. Now, he finally saw the main body of this gate. He wondered if behind this door, there was an extremely powerful existence, just like the previous door. In front of the current core area of the Dark Dragon God Temple. It was very likely that the Dark Dragon God's original body was inside. Perhaps his original body was hidden here, and this was very likely. Now, there was only one question in front of him. To enter or not to enter. If he entered, he would have to take a great risk. If he did not enter, he might miss out on a lot. I have already had several twists and turns on the path of cultivation. I have suffered countless hardships and lingered on the edge of life and death several times. I have even really died before and started cultivating again. Now, it's just a little danger. What's the big deal? A Saint King was a threat to him, but he could not take his life. What's more, he wanted to test it out for himself to see which was weaker. Qin Yu directly kicked open the thick and heavy door with a single kick. An ominous black mist swarmed out. However, the innermost part was emitting a light green and warm white light. Bathing made people feel relaxed and happy. It was as if they had gained some enlightenment in their hearts. Just by stepping in, their strength had improved a little. In the center of this light green light mixed with white warmth, there was a huge and majestic divine figure coiled here. However, its eyes were tightly shut. Its aura made people tremble. Even if they were looking at it from afar, anyone could not help but be angry and in awe. This was definitely a powerhouse, and he was even stronger than a saint king. Is this a dragon? But it was not the dark dragon god at all. Previously, he had also met the dark dragon god. It was clearly an incomparably pitch-black dragon. Although its strength was extremely powerful, it was only at the peak of the Saint King. Chapter 9:21. Until now, the Black Dragon God had not broken through to a higher realm. However, the aura of this figure was so strong that it shocked him. It could even be compared to mysterious Sky Senzun's strongest period. Even with his eyes closed, he already had such a demeanor. He wondered what it would be like when he opened his eyes. After standing for a while, he found that this expert did not have any intention of moving. It was as if he was dead. Qin Yu slowly approached. He felt an extremely weak aura, as if it would disappear in the next moment. This was an extremely powerful dragon. However, he had been seriously injured for some unknown reason. His strength should have been weakened more or less. However, just by lying there, he was emitting a terrifying aura. Qin Yu suddenly found that there were some light green threads on the ground. One of them was connected to the body of this unknown dragon expert, while the other was connected to the black fog. I feel the aura that belongs to the ancient region. I've eaten that grass for thousands of years. I definitely won't remember it wrong. One-Eyed picked one out of the countless green threads. He was very confident. Even if he remembered everything wrong, he would not forget this grass that he had been facing for thousands of years. The aura was extremely unique. He had never seen anything like it in other places. Not to mention a similar smell. It seemed that this was the Black Dragon God, the source of life that allowed people to wantonly plunder, and even faith. These green threads represented the boundless life force that was continuously transmitted here. And this white light made people feel extremely comfortable and relaxed. It should be some other power. It was even possible that this white light was the manifestation of faith. This was a rare and excellent training ground. The countless thin threads and the warm white light were like top-grade resources that could be reached with one's hands. Moreover, there were no side effects no matter how many of them were used. It was simply the ultimate source that everyone yearned for even in their dreams. Unknowingly, the door had quietly closed, and the surging black fog had no way of approaching the white light. Black and white formed a delicate balance. Even faintly, the white light was able to suppress all the black fog. Qin Yu sat cross-legged in the white light. Staying by the side of this unknown expert of the Dragon Clan, he slowly absorbed and refined the massive amount of energy. Sorry, I'm going to find the Black Dragon God now. I didn't get these things in the first place. Lend them to me first to increase my strength. If Senior wakes up in the future, I will repay you with other things. Only after this unknown powerhouse made the announcement did he calm himself down and slowly absorb this enormous power for his own use. Countless vigorous yet gentle forces rushed into his meridians. In the beginning, it only made people feel warm, but as time went on, the power transmitted increased. His meridians were unable to withstand such a huge amount of energy, and small cracks began to appear. However, under the repair of the green energy, it was quickly restored to perfect condition. Qin Yu's body was oozing with blood, but he didn't even frown from beginning to end. His meridians were constantly in a state of shattering, mending, and mending. Unknowingly, it was more than twice as wide as before. His cultivation base was also constantly rising. Late stage Xian Immortal. Peak Profound Immortal. The power was still endlessly rushing into his meridians, almost bursting his entire body to the point of exploding. However, for some unknown reason, his realm could not be raised no matter what. It seemed to be stuck at this point. He could clearly feel that thin layer of barrier. But he was unable to forcefully break through. Since his meridians had already doubled in size, it meant that the power he could store in his body was more than twice as much as that of people of the same level. Qin Yu began to use this power to temper his meridians and flesh, until his entire body turned into a bloody man. The dried blood covered his entire body, not revealing an inch of his skin. "Break for me." Qin Yu suddenly clenched his fist. The power in his body increased explosively and rushed out of his body. It completely shattered the thick layer of blood on his body. His realm was actually stuck at a certain critical point, and he needed to find an opportunity to break through by himself. However, his strength was not as simple as being doubled. Now, even if he faced a Sage King, with the support of countless trump cards, he still had the ability to fight. A huge power fluctuation. A huge wave magically appeared on the entire mountain peak. The Dark Dragon God was the first to sense this aura. Then, he let out a roar in disbelief. Before anyone could react, he quickly rushed towards the door of darkness. But the only thing that answered him was a door that had been opened. There was also a pitiful amount of white and green light. There was darkness everywhere. The huge and noble figure was about to be tainted by this darkness. Even after the white and green light decreased, the aura gradually weakened. Who is it? Who is it? Who dares to make such a big move in the territory of the Dark Dragon God? He even plundered the majestic power that I have collected for tens of millions of years. I must kill him. He just broke through, so he must not be too far away from here. I want all of you, even if you have to tear down this mountain, you must find out who that person is and bring him back alive. This loud voice spread to every corner. Even at the foot of the mountain, there was a faint sound. Qin Yu was not affected at all. He did what he should do. It was as if the person that the Dark Dragon God was so angry and even used all his strength to capture, regardless of life and death, was not him. He had just absorbed such a majestic energy and wanted to find someone to test it on. Sure enough, as soon as he walked out, he met some experts who came to look for him. When they saw him as a stranger and the aura on his body, they immediately recognized him. Moreover, even without this aura, they could recognize him more clearly. As long as they saw a stranger they did not know, they would directly kill him. They would rather kill countless people by mistake than let the culprit go. Anyway, as long as they brought the corpse back, they would know whether it was him or not. Our luck is really good. We can take him down together. Now that the Dark Dragon God is so angry, if we can put this person in front of the Dark Dragon God in the shortest time possible, he will definitely praise us. Maybe he will even give us the noble bloodline power of the Dark Dragon God. The two of them looked at Qin Yu with eyes full of desire. The angrier the Dark Dragon God was, the greater the reward they would receive for completing this matter. At that time, strength and status would be at their fingertip. The two of them immediately decided that they must not let others know. Chapter 922. A nine-jointed whip, like a pitch-black snake, struck out in an instant. A dark green wall of light was erected, encircling the few of them. The scenery here would not be seen by others. While the search outside was in full swing, no one would notice the battle here. You guys are much more considerate than I imagined. You even know to help me cover it up. Qin Yu smiled and took out a sword. After his strength increased, how much of his strength could he unleash? The strength of these two people could be considered to be extremely good. If it was before he broke through, it would take at least a dozen moves to defeat one of them. But now, he had a feeling in his heart that he only needed one sword. He would be able to end one of their lives. No one even saw the extremely bright sword light. The 9-section whip had already been cut into 7 or 8 pieces. It couldn't be any more broken. One person, one sword. There were no fancy moves. It was just the power of a single sword. It was so fast that no one could react. The two of them covered their necks and fell to the ground with their eyes wide open. Their breathing was completely cut off. Qin Yu, however, shakes his head in dissatisfaction. Originally, he could have been even faster. But he wasn't too familiar with the explosive increase in strength. As a result, there was a slight deviation, causing his movements to hesitate for a moment. He wasn't able to use it to the extreme. If he was faster, he wouldn't even need two. One would be enough to completely kill the two of them. As expected, their realm was no longer a threat to him. Although he hadn't broken through to the immortal soul realm, the immortal soul realm wasn't his match at all. No matter how many immortal souls were accumulated together, it would only take him a little more effort. If I find opponents in the future, I'll have to find even more powerful immortal souls. It's a pity that I forgot to leave one of them alive first. I can ask where the Black Dragon God is. Not long after, someone discovered the traces of a fight here. He judged that this person had just died. He immediately followed the traces he found and chased after him. However, by the time he caught up to Chinyu had also discovered him. Not long after, he suffered the same fate. He could only be reduced to a corpse. Similarly, even though he had shown mercy this time, the man still died on the spot. It was unrealistic to ask for the location of the Black Dragon God from others. It was simply too troublesome. Can you directly see the Black Dragon God over there? Show me the way. One-Eyed was suddenly patted. He finally realized that this was his chance to perform. He immediately became excited as if he had been injected with chicken blood. After pondering for a while, he pointed in a direction. The direction you're heading in doesn't seem right. I can only see that it's very, very dark. It shouldn't be like this. But the big guy you're looking for is over there. He looks very angry, and there are corpses all around him. Master, that guy is quite strong. Why don't you sneak attack him from behind? With me by your side, you will definitely succeed. Chinyu acted as if he didn't hear it. After the one-eyed man finished his long-winded speech, he also stood in front of the Dark Dragon God. The two of them looked at each other from a distance. Soon, the Black Dragon God sensed the unique aura of someone who had just broken through. Then, he combined it with what had happened before. How could he not know that everything that made him angry was done by the person in front of him? It was just that he didn't expect Chinyu to take the initiative to come to him. In his imagination, the person should have run away long ago. That was why he was so angry and impatiently sent everyone to look for him. You're the one who stole my power for 1,000 years. Chinyu shook his head. What he did wasn't considered stealing. He had told the powerhouse who stayed where he was in advance. And the other party had tacitly agreed to what he had done. So, this wasn't stealing. The so-called stealing refers to taking without asking, but I've already asked, so I took the thing. And this is only borrowed by me. I can return it to him later. I came to you this time to settle the grudge between us. The furious Black Dragon God didn't recognize Chinyu immediately. But after all, it hadn't been long since those two things happened. After a careful confirmation, he discovered. It turned out that this kid had ruined his plans more than once. And every time, he had caused a great obstacle to his plans. He immediately became even angrier. So it was all done by you. You deserve to die. My deployment for 1,000 years, as well as all the carefully collected things, were all destroyed by you. If it weren't for you, my plan would have almost succeeded. Of course, it wasn't because he wanted to save that dragon powerhouse out of kindness. In fact, that was a corpse of the true god realm that hadn't completely lost its vitality. The will inside had long dissipated. He had put in a lot of effort, and had even spent a lot of time and energy. Only then could he barely maintain the realm of this corpse and not fall too much. As long as he nurtured it for a period of time, his strength would become invincible below the true god realm. He could directly occupy that body, and then he would be the legitimate dragon god. But now, all of this was over. The vigorous power used to maintain the vitality. It had been completely devoured by Chinyu, who would never be able to surpass it in the future. After that, if he wanted to do as expected, then he would have to use 1,000 years to slowly repair it. One could imagine how big of a blow this was to him. Naturally, he regarded Chinyu as his mortal enemy in this life. Even his strength had never broken through the Holy King realm. It was because he had used all of his resources on that body. Killing you won't be able to relieve the hatred in my heart. I want you to beg for death and taste the most painful things in this world. Only this can relieve the hatred in my heart, But it's still not enough. I want you to spit out the power that belongs to me the same way I want you to. Qin Yu sighed slightly. In fact, he didn't want to make trouble. Now, it was like this until one of them died. One of the most important purposes of his coming here was to return to the immortal world. Of course, it was also to settle the grudges between him and the Dark Dragon God. It could also be considered as settling this karma. Unexpectedly. You're the one who said it. I'll give you one last chance to go back on your word. Either do as I say, or there will be a victor between you and me. At that time, we'll see who's living a life worse than death. What he hated the most was people threatening him. If someone wanted to make a move on him, he would definitely return an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And what responded to him? Only countless black rays of light. The black fog, which originally didn't have any powerful attack power, turned into countless sharp arrows under the control of the Dark Dragon God. The tip was extremely sharp. Chapter 923. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Countless light shadows formed a curtain of rain. However, under this dark curtain of rain, there was a hidden danger that was enough to be fatal. Under these innumerable attacks, Yi Zichen was stunned. Qin Yu and the Dragon Soul were gradually covered up. But the Black Dragon God felt a sense of crisis from the bottom of his heart. It was as if something extremely unfavorable to him was about to happen. In the next moment, his bad premonition became reality. A huge gap suddenly appeared in the middle of the black curtain of rain formed by countless sharp arrows. The dazzling white light tore his power apart. Qin Yu slowly walked out of the light shadow, and the aura on his body continued to strengthen with every step he took. When he arrived in front of the Black Dragon God, the aura on his body had reached a terrifying level. Although it was slightly inferior to the Black Dragon God. However, the restraining power on Qin Yu's body made the Black Dragon God tremble all over. Such a powerful power belongs to you. It had to be said that he did feel a sense of crisis now, even if he didn't take it to heart before. He was more angry. But now, he felt fear. Because the current Qin Yu actually had the ability to injure him. This was completely different from what he thought before. Too much nonsense. Extremely powerful forces were constantly brewing and colliding in his hands, setting off huge waves and even distorting the air. Before I make my move, I only ask you, will you submit or die? The Black Dragon God fell into a rage. It's impossible for me to submit, defeat me first. If you can't defeat me, don't mention such a ridiculous condition. Qin Yu sighed imperceptibly. Immediately after, he lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and leapt up. It wasn't until he stood at the same height as the Black Dragon God that he quickly made his move and pointed at the reverse scale. This time, he used a trace of the power of divine thunder. Now, his strength had increased by a lot. At this time, when he used the power of divine thunder, it was even more powerful than before. And after tempering, his strength had more than doubled. This trace of divine thunder continued to grow after flying out of his palm. In front of the Black Dragon God, it had already turned into a huge pillar of light, hitting the Black Dragon God like a stick. It turned into a sky full of lightning, tightly wrapping around him and strangling him. With its huge body, it would not be easy for the Dark Dragon God to hide. What's more, this lightning could be said to cover the sky and earth. Therefore, he was caught off guard and was tightly bound, and a burnt smell came from his body. The pain made him roll on the ground, only to extinguish the lightning on his body. However, the lightning would only grow stronger after the attack. He had no way of extinguishing the lightning. Countless black fog spread out from his body, but it was quickly dispersed by the lightning. In the end, he used up an unknown amount of energy to completely eliminate the last trace of lightning on his body. As the saying goes, take your life when you're sick. Qin Yu immediately rushed forward. The common weakness of the dragons was their reverse scales. No matter how powerful their reverse scales and horns were, they were still their weakest points. Of course, it was also what they valued the most. If someone touched them lightly, they would explode and even fall into a state of violence. Now, the most vulnerable part of his body was suddenly attacked. It was slashed apart by a single sword strike. The pain suffered by the Black Dragon God was even greater. Dark blood slowly spread from his wound, forming a huge pool of blood on the ground. "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to tear you into pieces." Qin Yu frowned. "Even so, you're still not willing to bow down? It seems that your injuries are not serious enough, so you still haven't accepted your fate." Annihilation, divine thunder. After hearing those words, the Black Dragon God couldn't help but shrink back and quickly wanted to leave this place. What deployment for 1,000 years? What wealth and power accumulated for 1,000 years? Any gratitude and grudges were no longer important. Now, he just wanted to run and leave this place as soon as possible. With his strength, he could gather a group of subordinates wherever he went and have a force of his own. Why would he lose his life here? But would Qin Yu let him leave so easily? The commemorative divine thunder in his hand had already grown into a huge ball of light. However, it was still growing until it was as tall as a person. Qin Yu completely compressed it, and in the middle, there were crackling sounds of collision. It was as if there was an explosion and destruction inside. But in the end, all the energy was kneaded into a fist-sized ball by him. And this ball of lightning had an incomparably deep aura, with a powerful destructive power, causing people to be terrified. Qin Yu, or Lei Guang's hand, was almost injured. Even if he was the owner of this ball of lightning, go! The Black Dragon God was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he disappeared from this world. A group of people had already gathered at the foot of the mountain. One of them barely opened his eyes, and his aura was weak. It was Jiu Yi. Du Hai couldn't help but touch the few strands of hair on his head. "Are you sure that person knows my identity and came here, and hasn't come down yet? I'm sure he must be around here. I just don't know where he is, but it seems that he won't leave this place easily. I'm worried that he will affect our plan. If he alerts the enemy, how can we catch the Black Dragon God?" "That's right. If we alert the enemy and let the Black Dragon God transfer the body of the true God expert, what should we do? Then we've been lurking for so long, waiting for this moment with great difficulty. Wouldn't it be useless?" The few of them talked back and forth. But all of them had some fear of the terrifying existence on the mountain peak. They confirmed that they had used various methods to find something that could be used to restrain the Black Dragon God. But this mission was indeed difficult to complete. Under the pressure of an expert, they only had a pitiful 40% chance of winning. There was only a 10% chance of getting the body of the true God intact. It looked very pitiful and very little. But they also knew that this was already the highest success rate in their deployment for many years. In the past, it couldn't even compare to this success rate. The reason why they took action was that the 1,000-year period was almost up. As long as they let it go for a while. At that time, whether it was the Black Dragon God or the Dark True God that appeared in front of them was not certain. Such an expert must be extremely difficult to deal with. Carefully check the things on your body. Even if we fail this time, we must quickly send the latest information back. In order to let the future generations get more experience. With a resolute heart, Du Hai stepped into the array formation. Suddenly, the Black Dragon God, whose body was full of a burnt smell, rushed out, followed by a very small ball of light. Chapter 924. Not long after the Dragon God left, the lightning, which seemed to be able to completely melt the void, followed him at the fastest speed possible and pierced through him in one fell swoop. Blood flowed down uncontrollably. The Black Dragon God unwillingly closed his eyes. His huge and heavy body fell directly to the ground, causing dust to fly up and creating a deep pit. The Black Dragon God carried one in each hand. In the end, he couldn't carry them anymore and directly kicked the remaining few out. Behind him was a huge cloud of dust caused by the fall of the Black Dragon God. In the deep pit lay the Black Dragon God, who only had a weak breath left. Perhaps it would be better to call him the Black Dragon. At this moment, the Black Dragon no longer had the dignity and pride of a dragon god. In the end, because of this loud sound, the subordinates who were loyal to the Black Dragon God and followed him down. When they came out and saw the Black Dragon God in such a sorry state, they couldn't help but be shocked and even have doubts. Was this really the Black Dragon God that they had always regarded as a true god? If he was really a true god, How could he be beaten to such a sorry state by someone who hadn't even broken through to the immortal soul realm? With such a huge difference in strength, he still couldn't control the situation and was on the verge of death. They couldn't help but wonder if their actions had any meaning at all. But in the end, there was still a group of loyal people who attacked Qin Yu without saying anything. Some of the people on him also reacted. Those who attacked Qin Yu would not be distracted. The rest quickly followed the Black Dragon God. They took out all the life-saving items they could take out to continue the Black Dragon God's life. With the support of such a huge amount of resources, the Black Dragon God soon woke up. But just as he opened his eyes, he saw that his most important and useful subordinates had died tragically in the hands of Qin Yu. Ah! Who told you to be so reckless? To be able to injure him to such an extent, how could they possibly be able to stop him just by swarming him? Qin Yu didn't pay attention to the Black Dragon God. He was already seriously injured. Even with the support of so many good life-saving items, he was able to escape from a state of near death. However, the injuries on his body still made it impossible for him to escape from Qin Yu's grasp. In the blink of an eye, the few people that the Dragon Soul had killed were Du Hai and even Jiao Yi, whom he had met once before. There were also a few people he didn't recognize, but he guessed that they were from the same organization. Since he had come here, his goal was only the Black Dragon God. The Black Dragon God is my own prey. Everything here is my spoils of war. It has nothing to do with you. You can stay here and watch if you want. I won't stop you if you want to leave, but please don't do anything that doesn't matter. Du Hai didn't expect this. In his eyes, the guy who was generous and could be called the child of wealth actually had such powerful strength. However, they quickly reacted. Originally, they had targeted the Black Dragon God not to get rid of evil for the people. After all, they were also from the Dark World, even if Lanshaw was a little special. But this time, they had spent so much time and effort to organize it, all for the sake of reaping great benefits from it. But now, not only did he fail to reap any benefits, he could only be a bystander for some reason. He had even almost lost his life, which made him feel very surprised. Why did things suddenly become like this? But he didn't have so much time to think about these trivial things. The few people who had been kicked out by the Dragon Soul were more or less injured. At this moment, they were curled up and rolling on the side, wailing. Not only did they not gain anything, but they also had to pay a large sum of money for treatment for no reason. Some of the things that they wanted to get were also used up. But all they could do was watch from the side. Du Hai was unwilling to leave, and none of the people around him were willing to leave just like that. Now that you have been defeated by me, I will ask you again, will you submit or die? The Black Dragon God still wanted to get up and fight back. So he made a compromising gesture and raised his head slightly. But in the next moment, Qin Yu stepped on the wound on his reverse scale and directly kicked him back into the deep pit. Don't play any tricks in front of me. There are only two paths in front of you. Give me the blood essence, or I will directly extract it from your body. Who said that only by making these dragons submit to him could he get the blood essence he wanted? If the relatively gentler methods didn't work, then he could only be a little more heavy-handed. Was it death or paying a certain price? He had no choice. He didn't want to die yet. He still wanted to have endless good fortune. He wanted to reach the peak and become a true god. He wanted to look down on all eternity. He wanted everything in this world to tremble and worship because of his aura. How could someone like him say that he was willing to submit to him? Let me cut off all my ties with the past in the end. From now on, you are my one and only master. Please give me this opportunity. He suddenly became much easier to talk to. He just begged to be allowed to say goodbye to the people in the Black Dragon Temple before the final result was out. This wasn't a very troublesome matter. Even when the Black Dragon God finished speaking, his former subordinates all leaned over one by one. When most of the people arrived at his side, the Black Dragon God couldn't wait any longer. An imperceptible translucent line appeared on his body. He directly tied up all the people around him tightly. Everyone was under his control. Then, all their vitality was sucked dry. All his strength and everything he had once given these people. His injuries were rapidly healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, most of the injuries on his body had been healed. Ha 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 ha. I don't want to die, nor do I want to live a life worse than death. Do you really think that I have no means of saving my life after being the Black Dragon God for so many years? You were careless this time. Was Qin Yu really careless? Not at all. All of this was within his expectations. And this kind of thing wasn't worth his surprise. Before he was conquered, a large net made of lightning appeared under his feet. It directly slapped the Black Dragon God to the ground again. And this time, it tightly bound him, not giving him any chance to display his strength. You just happened to help me get rid of most of the hidden dangers. If they ran to other places, a few of them might come out and cause trouble for me. Now that you've helped me get rid of all of them, I feel very satisfied. The air suddenly became deathly silent. Chapter 925. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The Dark Dragon God's laughter stopped abruptly. From then on, he could no longer utter a single word. The powerful lightning directly destroyed his body. As a result, his body was torn into several pieces. Qin Yu directly took action and took everything that could be taken from the Dark Dragon God's body. As for his strength, as well as the precious dragon tendons and dragon bones, he handed them all to the little azure dragons. These two little fellows could be said to be gluttons. They were not picky about anything. Of course, if the energy contained in the food was strong enough, it would be of great help to their strength. If the food did not have any value, not only would it not fill their stomachs, it would also be of no benefit to them. Although it was just a corpse, it was still the corpse of a peak holy ruler. The flesh and blood contained an extremely large amount of energy. To the two little azure dragons who were not picky eaters, it was the best food and tonic. Moreover, it contained the bloodline of the dragon clan. To them, it was a moderately nourishing product. Turning around, he found that Du Hai and the others were still there. Qin Yu thought for a moment and walked in front of them. Everything over there is my spoils of war. However, if you are not in a hurry to leave, you can help me clean up the battlefield. He only took what he wanted and what was useful to him. Many of the remaining things were useless to him. For example, the wealth that the Dark Dragon God had accumulated over 1,000 years. Another example was the many things that were left on the mountain peak that were useless to him. Every item had its own reason for existing and also its own value. Perhaps to these people, it was not a small gain. At least it was not a completely wasted trip. He was only reminding them out of goodwill because they had provided him with information. There is a weak point in the formation over there. You can find a way to break through there. By the time I think of it, I will have already left. Du Hai still had many questions, such as where did Qin Yu come from? For example, he wanted to know if the corpse of a true god existed. However, before he could ask any of these questions, Qin Yu had already disappeared in front of him. Once again, he appeared on the mountain peak. There were no more enemies here. The remaining people had already fled in panic. A series of unforeseen events had caused this place to become a deserted place. Over the past 1,000 years, the resources accumulated by the Dragon God were not only that much, but many of them were also extremely valuable. All kinds of resources were of great help to him. However, it was a pity that although these resources were enormous, they weren't enough. However, there weren't many that he could use. That's way too poor. That's right, Qin Yu's definition of this place was poverty. A dignified great force, a sage king's treasure vault, only had this trash that he had no use for. Picking and choosing with extreme dislike, Qin Yu refined and absorbed a portion of them. However, it did not increase his strength by much. In the end, he simply left. He only took away some of the things that looked quite interesting. He didn't touch most of the remaining items. Because these things were all trash to him. To any force in the dark world, these things were enough to make them go crazy. It could be imagined that Du Hai had gone through a lot of trouble to destroy the entire array formation from its weak point and come here. After discovering a huge amount of resources. How shocking was that? He couldn't help but cry. These were tears that were shed because he was too excited. Even if they didn't get the corpse of the true God, it didn't matter. After all, it was just a legend, although some people had seen it with their own eyes. However, that was just a rumor. No one could confirm whether this news was true or false. Now, no rumors or the corpse of the true God could compare to the benefits that were really in front of them, even if they had to divide it with different forces in the future. However, there were still many things that could fall into their hands, especially when these things were brought back by them. Just this alone was enough for them to get a huge amount of rewards. Everyone, we can inform our masters now. Although there were some twists and turns in the process, the final result was good. He only felt that the long time spent on manpower and material resources was already worth it. His investment in this was not even worth mentioning when compared to the income this time. Qin Yu had already left. This time, he found an empty place and once again drew the void teleportation array. This was the so-called void teleportation array. It was accidentally obtained by a subordinate of the Dark Dragon God. It was not complete. It only had a fixed teleportation function. If he wanted to teleport a long distance, even across 2 realms, he would need to pay a great price. Countless materials that he had collected but were of little use to him. They were all used on this void teleportation array. Because he entered the array step by step, it began to emit a faint light. Then the light became stronger and stronger, and in the end, it even set off a pillar of light that soared into the sky. This powerful pillar of light attracted everyone within 100 miles. There were also experts who rushed over from thousands of miles away. Jiao Yi and Du Hai seemed to have felt something when their gazes landed on that pillar of light. Until a figure stepped on the air. Under the gaze of countless people, he entered the light shadow. The pillar of light that soared into the sky disappeared instantly. The blood-colored dark clouds that were broken through also slowly closed. As if nothing had happened, the world returned to calm. However, this time the teleportation failed. Qin Yu was slightly inexperienced, and there were some slight deviations in the landing position. In the end, he was teleported to the edge of the dark realm. There was nothing here. There was only a disheveled old madman who called himself the Demon King. He was tied up by countless iron chains. He could only use 20% of his strength. After seeing him, he was like a dog that saw a meat bone. Come and worship me as your master, and I will teach you all the unique skills of my life, as long as you let me go. I see that you have reached such a realm at such a young age. You are also a genius. As long as you promise. A hand easily grabbed his throat and cut off all the words he had not finished speaking. The old madman could not say anything. He had already fallen to the ground in disbelief. He did not seem to understand why someone could refuse him. Qin Yu casually threw the corpse aside. He shook his hand. So noisy. So what if he was a strong expert? He looked so weak and feeble. He still wanted him to worship him as his master. Dream on. There was everything in dreams. Naturally, there was bliss, and there was no pain. Chapter 926. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. A powerhouse who had been besieged fell just like that. He was extremely unwilling before he died. He was framed and ended up here for various reasons. He was chained up and exiled to this deserted place. But in the end, he never thought that he would die in the hands of an ordinary passerby. Qin Yu was a little surprised. Perhaps this crazy old man was not without anything. At least after his death, some of his things fell out. It was a book and a strange-looking key. And this book did not look like a martial technique. He slowly flipped it open. A stream of light suddenly appeared in the book and drilled directly between Qin Yu's eyebrows. This was the Book of Revelation. According to the information that drilled between his eyebrows, the Book of Revelation could predict all the opportunities that would follow. In other words, as long as there was an opportunity about to appear, he would be able to get the news before anyone else. Then, he just needed to get the opportunity in his hands. Before anyone could react, he would quickly leave. He would be able to silently improve his strength. And he would not have to take a big risk. He would not have to wait bitterly for the day when he encountered the opportunity. Of course. Such a heaven-defying function was not without conditions. To obtain a huge amount of resources, one had to first contribute a portion of good things to him. There was enough information recorded in this book. It also had an income function. Each page could be used to record. It could also be used to store an item. The effect could be said to be extremely powerful. But if one wanted to open this book and obtain the information of an opportunity, one had to obtain the key. The more accurate the information one wanted to obtain, the more things one had to give to the book. Use it as an exchange? That's interesting. Unfortunately, if I give you something, even if I can obtain the opportunity in the end, what can I do? I took such a big risk, and in the end, I still have to give you what I obtained. As long as I still want to obtain the next thing. But in this way, how much of the book holder's hands would be left? Even if he traveled all over the world and snatched the opportunities of countless people, his hands would still be empty. Other than the portion given to the Book of Revelation, he would use a small portion himself. There was nothing left. In other words, when he worked hard in the end, he would find that it was all for naught. The key he obtained just now should be the key that the book wanted him to take out. But why did he give it to it? To me, you are of no use. The only use it has is really too weak. He threw the book to the side. Useless trash. Keeping it on him was of no use. So, he might as well think about how to activate the formation. This time, he would be able to return to Tianju. But he had already used a lot of things. Now if he wanted to activate the formation. Translation, the loss was. Translation. I wonder if this book can be used to activate the formation. Zhong Xian muttered to himself. The book translation it was translation. Translation is translation Lin Jiao translation on translation is translation. It was as if he was afraid that Qin Yu would not be able to see it. Every word was especially big and eye-catching. It turned out that there was a book spirit in this book. Only half of what it told Qin Yu was true. Indeed, it could know where each opportunity would appear. But it didn't need to consume much resources. The only limitation was that it could only detect all the opportunities within 1,000 miles. The storage function was also real. It did need to consume a page. But there was no need to only put one thing on a page. There could be a small mountain of things inside. The previous master had left many things here. But I still don't need you. The book spirit should be able to be used to help me activate the formation. Now that you have seen it, I just want to return to the immortal world. So you are useless to me. Could it be that he had to walk left and right with a book in his hand every day just to find some so-called opportunity? It wasn't like he didn't have anything he could use. If he wanted an opportunity one day, it wouldn't be bad. But he had never lacked one. But this place was desolate and uninhabited, not to mention a radius of 1,000 miles. There was nothing within a radius of 10,000 miles. There was no life. The Book of Revelation had been here long enough. It had been here for 2,000 years. Until the previous owner was old and feeble. From a handsome young genius, he had become an old man, a malevolent old madman. It still had no way to leave this place. In order to leave this place, it was willing to pay any price. Then, another row of words appeared on the page. After Qin Yu read it, he smiled and took the book with him. It turned out that the key was the thing that could really control the book spirit. It was similar to a keepsake. As long as the ancient key was completely refined, he could leave his mark on the Book of Revelation, so that the book would never betray him. Only when the current master died would it be free of its shackles and find the next master. Of course, the book spirit yearned for the vast world and didn't want to be bound to one place. So, at this time, it would often use various methods to make its master believe it. It seems that this isn't the first time you've lied. The book spirit trembled all over. It immediately swore that it would never betray or deceive Qin Yu. Qin Yu was the only person it had ever seen who was so ruthless. He killed its previous master without hesitation. One had to know that its previous owner was an opportunity that was clearly recorded in its records. He didn't even want an opportunity that was obvious. In the eyes of the Book of Revelation, this kind of person couldn't be offended. Because once it offended him, it would be destroyed. That's right, the Master had the right to kill the book spirit. In fact, he could even erase its consciousness with his hand. From then on, the Book of Revelation was just a tool, at the mercy of others. Who knew how many tens of thousands of years later, a book spirit might be born? You said that you have many functions. Can you let me return to the immortal world? The book spirit closed the pages of his book. If it had a way to teleport, would they let him stay in this barren place for such a long time? Qin Yu set up a new array. There wasn't enough time to go to other places to exchange for resources. I'll just have to make do with it. Chapter 927. He had a lot of things that he could use. Most of them were things that he didn't use before. They had already piled up like a mountain. Although they were different, and some were even naturally repelled. But when all of them were added to the formation, it could still produce a good effect. A huge white light flashed again. Qin Yu directly appeared on a mountain in Tianju. There weren't many people here. Even though someone had seen him, he still had to do his own thing and do his own thing. After returning from the Dark Realm, the aura on his body was even more terrifying. If he didn't restrain it, one could feel his strength from afar. Thus, they didn't dare to easily come up. An unfamiliar expert, thinking about it, he knew that he wasn't someone easy to get along with. Those who would take the initiative to provoke him and court death were in the minority. After going down the mountain, he casually grabbed an ordinary Xian immortal. Did anything happen in Tianju recently? I went there before and just came back. The Xian immortal was originally very shocked. He panicked that he met an expert and directly grabbed him without saying anything. But after hearing this, he relaxed a lot. Not much had happened in Tianju recently. If there was something to talk about, there would be some waves. Lord Kaori's strength broke through to the immortal level. After that, it attracted many people who didn't belong to any sect to pledge their loyalty to them. There was also an expert who suddenly popped out called Sichu something. It was said that he was extremely powerful, but until now, no one had seen him in action. It was said that the expert who suddenly appeared destroyed the Blood Ape clan with his own strength. Even the experts whose strength was comparable to the immortal level were turned into ashes by his hands. In the blink of an eye, he destroyed thousands of ordinary Blood Apes. Seems like he's been doing well recently. Qin Yu didn't expect that his unintentional actions would actually let Sichu Hua gain so many benefits. Now, he had already gained a foothold in Tianju. Even if he was the last to come out, he had his own territory one step earlier than him. If I didn't go to the Dark Realm because of that void teleportation formation, I should be able to make a name for myself. After all, didn't the current Sichu Hua use his achievements to forcefully take over his own head? That's why he was doing so well. But it was fine. Just the name of a small expert. To him, it was just icing on the cake. It was dispensable. The Xian Immortal was quickly released by him. When he returned to the heavenly ship, his goal had completely changed. Previously, he wanted to see if there were any traces of Shentian Senzun. This time, he came to this chaotic land again to look for the opportunity to break through. Book of Revelation, where do you think is the key to my breakthrough? The book spirit forced himself to concentrate, and started to search. It had to spend a certain amount of time to check if there was an opportunity for Qin Yu to break through within a 1,000-mile radius. But in the end, it did not dare to say it out loud. He even wondered if he had made a mistake. Otherwise, why would a profound immortal be sent to such a dangerous place? Qin Yu saw the leaf tremble slightly, but it refused to lift it. He immediately gave it a hand. Then, he saw a haircut. And the words on it. "Tai our divine platform. Only immortals have the right to enter. Can you obtain the supreme opportunity of the great Tao?" It seemed like he could flip to another page. Qin Yu continued to flip through the pages. Then, he saw an opportunity in another place. Azura Blood Sea. Devouring all things and turning them into blood water. Even a sage king cannot leave alive. Barge into the Azura Sea, seize the Azura soul, and enjoy the pain of nirvana. Interesting. Both of these pages were very interesting. And each place was extremely dangerous. The former looked slightly better. The latter only had danger left. And it looked like there was only danger, and there were no opportunities. Even if he barged into the Azura Sea and seized the Azura soul, he still had to enjoy the pain of nirvana. There were no benefits, and there was no reward. But he wanted to go. What was the path of nirvana? Previously, he had only learned a part of it from the king of blood apes. But what was the value of those words? Perhaps he could get the answer in this Azura blood sea. The book spirit trembled in an extremely human-like manner. He looked at Qin Yu in disbelief. Especially when the dragon soul and one-eyed had no intention of persuading him. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't make any sound, he would have screamed and told them how terrifying the path of Azura was. This was unreasonable. The Azura was an ancient race. Even the demons disdained to be associated with them. Because the Azura were heartless and only knew bloodthirstiness. But the most difficult thing to deal with was that the Azura had unparalleled strength. That was a combat talent that no race could compare to. Therefore, what the Book of Revelation said was that anyone who went would die. Even a sage king, don't even think about escaping unscathed. And this was just standing on the periphery. If they really went to the Azura Sea and wanted to seize the Azura soul, even a sage king would suffer a backlash. That was an extremely dangerous place of death. It didn't even know why the Book of Revelation had become like this, giving such a message that almost killed people. I think it's quite good. Then let's go to the Azura blood sea. As for the Tyar divine platform, if there was a chance in the future, he could go there again. But the so-called Great Tao couldn't compare to his interest in the path of nirvana. But since the Book of Revelation could detect this, perhaps it could detect what the so-called Supreme Great Tao opportunity in the Tyar divine platform meant. The book spirit stared blankly as a string of words appeared on the page. Qin Yu didn't find the word nirvana in it. He couldn't help but feel disappointed. In the end, he decided to go to the Azura blood sea. He was more interested in nirvana. But the Tyar divine platform didn't have this. The book spirit wanted him to think carefully again. That place was really, really dangerous. Many people had died there, and there was no lack of powerful experts. So what if he's strong? I'm just going to take a look. What can he do to me? Qin Yu remained unmoved. Furthermore, he even walked a bit faster. That place was truly a no-man's land. The soil was suffused with a hint of blood red. There were no living creatures here, nor was there anything of value. However, no one who came here would be able to survive. Over time, this place became a place where no one dared to come. All kinds of strange legends and rumors filled the place, but no one dared to explore it. There wasn't a strong smell of blood in the air, but the soil under one's feet could be easily squeezed out with a handful of blood. Chapter 928. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. This place should have been a battlefield. It should have been the burial ground of countless people. And it was on this piece of land piled up with flesh and blood that a powerful existence like the Shura was born, which defied all common sense. This was an unfamiliar name, but Qin Yu had already learned a lot from the Book of Revelation. The Azura was powerful, but it was born bloodthirsty and had almost no nature of its own. It had no tribe and no companions. It could only be born in an extremely special place. The aura here is too terrifying. Let's run. There's actually an Azura in the Sage King realm here. And I thought the Azura here was just an immortal. The book spirit trembled. It could not even get close to this place. Even if it looked at it from afar, it could not help but want to run immediately. If it had legs and could run, it would definitely run away from here at all costs. Don't be so nervous. It's just an Azura. Didn't you say that no one would be interested in such a creature? Then there's no need to care. Why are you afraid? However, other creatures with some intelligence looked down on the Azura. The fundamental reason was that there was no way to deal with such a terrifying existence. Moreover, if the Azura went crazy, it would not care who you were. If there was no one around, it could even attack you. It was such a bloodthirsty and irrational monster that people looked down on. However, this did not mean that they were weak. On the contrary, the Asura had an unparalleled talent in battle. It was enough to crush anyone. It was invincible among those of the same realm. It could even fight across realms. Most importantly, whenever the Asura attacked, it would either kill itself or the enemy. This was the most frightening part of it, and it made people want to avoid it like the plague. Over time, this kind of existence even became a taboo topic. After Qin Yu heard this, not only did he not back down, but he was also interested. It was a pity that such a powerful existence did not have any rationality. Regarding this, the book spirit said that everything in the world had its own way of balance. If you wanted to get something, you would have to pay a price without knowing. This was equivalent. However, was this world really fair? If it was really fair, there would be no such thing as heaven and earth being heartless. There were also no weaklings who could be easily destroyed by the strong. Then, there wouldn't be so many unfair things happening in this world. Therefore, fairness was only relative. If you are strong enough to defeat the heavens, defeat this Tao. Would he still need to be restricted by the so-called heaven and earth? Growing up in this world, how could anyone possibly defeat heaven? Qin Yu smiled as he stepped into the blood-colored soil. His voice was unhurried. Just because no one has done it before doesn't mean that no one will be able to do it in the future. If there really is someone who can defeat the heavens, do you still think that there is a need for him to follow the so-called equivalence rules? Although the so-called Shura was powerful, he didn't have a mind of his own. This meant that there was a limit to his strength. Their minds were filled with only battle. To be more precise, they were purposely created battle machines. Furthermore, they had no way of controlling their own fate. In his eyes, he was still a weakling. It was laughable that he couldn't even control his own thoughts and reason. Could this still be considered life? The moment they stepped into the Asura blood sea, they could feel the fresh blood in the soil beneath their feet. He could feel every slight movement around him. However, other than the sound of his footsteps, there wasn't even any wind. There was silence everywhere. It was so quiet that it was strange, so quiet that it was terrifying. The real blood sea was hidden underground. It was a completely dark space. Everything on the ground was just an illusion. Only by stepping into the real Asura blood sea. Only then could one feel the thick, almost tangible smell of blood assaulting their faces. What a nauseating smell of blood. Do the so-called Shuras live in such an environment? As expected, they are just a bunch of people who drag out an ignoble existence. They can only live in the shadows and can't see the light of day. What's the difference between these so-called extremely powerful existences and ants? They are just like underground rats. He had to admit that he was somewhat disappointed. He originally thought that he might be able to see some extremely powerful experts. However, he now realized that if the Shura was powerful, then the Shura's only advantage was that he was powerful. Whether it was his personality or all the characteristics of his body, they were all possessed by the weak. Only the weak couldn't control their own thoughts. Only the weak couldn't control their own strength. Only the weak would hide in such a place. Hide and steal life. The heavy voice fell. Suddenly, small circles of ripples appeared on the blood-red water surface. It was as if someone was gently stirring the pool of blood below. But then, as if it was boiling, endless bubbles popped out of it. Blood spread to the ground. In the midst of the tumbling, a blood-red hand covered with all kinds of dark red lines reached out. The dark red lines formed an extremely strange pattern on the hand. If someone with a weak mind saw the pattern, their mind would be disturbed and they would feel endless fear. Then, the entire arm followed by the head and the rest of the body. In the end, only the 2 feet were left soaking. The Asura's eyes were pitch black. No eyeballs could be seen. The whites of the eyes could only be seen as pitch black, as if they were 2 empty holes. Qin Yu wasn't frightened by this scene. Instead, he was interested to see where the Asura calculated from. In the end, he found that the Asura had been hiding under the blood pool all along. Are you going to keep floating like this? Why don't you come down and take a rest? After all, although you're already dead now, ghosts should also need to rest. The way I see it, you don't seem to be willing to die like this. However, the so-called Asura didn't have any rationality. It wasn't a casual remark. Perhaps he understood, but he could only roar like a beast and rush up with his hands like claws. Qin Yu took the attack with his bare hands. The speed couldn't be considered very fast. At least, it could be considered good among his opponents. However, speed wasn't the main point. But the strength of this body couldn't be underestimated. The strength of the hand was very strong. Just this kind of rampage, without any technique to speak of, made his arm go numb. Such great strength. I'm interested. He came here to take a good look. Chapter 929. The dark red claws were like phantoms, attacking from all sorts of angles and from all sorts of angles. Because he had no rationality, it was impossible to judge his moves. He could only passively endure all the attacks. No one knew what kind of method he would use to attack at the next moment. Because there was no pattern to speak of. Looks like I can't communicate. Qin Yu had already tried to speak a lot. He found that this Asura only had decent strength. And he could understand part of his words. But he didn't have any ability to communicate. In other words, Qin Yu could only anger him further, but he couldn't get anything useful from him. There was no need for useless things to exist. Although an open and above-board expert would arouse his admiration. But a monster like this who only knew how to attack and thirst for blood, he completely refused. If such a monster was left alone, he would only grow into an overlord in the future. Moreover, this was an opportunity for him to break through, so he couldn't let it go. If the news you told me isn't true, and there's nothing useful to me here, then I think I should burn you like firewood. This way, I can still use the remaining heat. The book spirit almost swore to the heavens that it had never made a mistake before. But it was a little uncertain. From its point of view, Qin Yu's current situation was a mistake. How could a mystic immortal challenge a holy king-level expert? How was that possible? But in the end, it still guaranteed. There was absolutely no problem with the results. I hope so. Facing a ghost, although its combat strength had reached the level of a holy king-level ghost. But it was much easier to deal with. As long as he could use a special method to restrain it, he could easily win. Qin Yu happened to have a way to restrain ghosts. The current him could restrain all demons and monsters. Whether it was ghosts or the dark realm, all of them were restrained by him. Not long after, the Asura soul fell into his hands without any resistance. However, it was still struggling unceasingly. It was looking at Qin Yu with its pitch-black, colorless eyes. After such a long time, Qin Yu was even able to feel that his mood was undergoing some minute changes. But he had never been someone who was led by the nose. You're still lacking if you want to shake my heart. The Asura soul wasn't just a lunatic. If one came into contact with the Shura for a long time, even the enemies they fought with would go crazy and become bloodthirsty. In the end, he might even become a terrifying existence like Asura. This was the terrifying aspect of Asuras, and also the reason why Asuras were considered taboo once they appeared. As long as one's strength was slightly weaker, not only would they be throwing their lives away, but they would also be sending themselves to their deaths. Even if he managed to return, he would turn into a madman and become the next Asura. Such a terrifying price caused everyone to feel extreme disgust, and it was even to the extent that they all avoided it. Forcefully seize the Asura's soul. It was just 6 simple words, but there were no other clues. Qin Yu could only slowly fumble around on his own. He had never tried to forcibly take over a soul before. This was a literal forceful occupation. It absolutely wasn't to directly take the Asura soul for his own use. There should be some deeper meaning behind this. It was the Book of Revelation that had led him here. It was also the Book of Revelation that allowed him to seize the Shura's soul. Now that he was confused and didn't know where to start, he naturally had to ask the Book of Revelation that had guided him to do all this. Perhaps you can try to use your own power to come into contact with it. I have a method here that you can try. Use your own soul power to come into contact with its soul power and defeat it. This was a special way to control one's own soul power. And it didn't just allow the learner to know how to control their own soul power. If one cultivated it to the extreme, they could even let their soul exist outside of their body. Even if their body was severely damaged, their soul could leave at any time, and they could even create a new body for themselves. Wasn't this the method of resurrection after death? If one learned it to the extreme, they could even be resurrected over and over again, and create a new body for themselves. As long as there were enough materials, it would be enough. The Book of Revelation looked ordinary, but it was actually quite something. Perhaps he could see if there were any other methods in the future. If even such an extremely rare and unpopular method existed, then it wouldn't be difficult to take out some martial arts techniques. With the assistance of this unique method, Qin Yu quickly established a spiritual connection with the Shora's soul. However, just as he reacted, he was pulled into a unique spiritual space. There was nothing else here other than him and the Shora's soul. And the Shora's soul on the other side seemed to have turned into a physical body, instead of a soul that had nothing to rely on. However, this was not what caught his attention the most. It was the nameless Shora's incomparably clear eyes. Although his pupils were slightly dark red, the whites of his eyes were still there, and they were extremely distinct. It seems that your mind is still very clear. But if I'm not wrong, you can't control your every move. Otherwise, he wouldn't have acted so crazily before. And let alone speaking, even his attacks were disorderly. It wasn't full of flaws, but there was no intention to defend at all, and there was no order to it. The Shora on the other side was already very clear-headed, but his gaze towards Qin Yu was still unfriendly. The Shora was the manifestation of the world's darkest side. Even if he was clear-headed, he didn't have any goodwill towards anything in this world. Since you're already here, then don't talk so much nonsense with me. I'm not in some damned soul state here. Your methods are useless against me. Qin Yu wanted to take out the weapon that he had been using all this time. But there was no movement at all. It seemed that he could only use his bare hands here. But in the next moment, this thought was dispelled. Because the Shora on the other side had already taken out an extremely powerful weapon. It was an extremely wide and thick saber. The back of the saber was at least 2 feet thick. And the tip of the saber was extremely sharp, flickering with silver light. And there were countless strange patterns on the saber. They seemed to be countless evil spirits screaming in fear. They were densely packed together, making one's scalp tingle. And on the patterns of this strange pattern, there were dark red dried traces. The threads of blood made the pattern look even more frightening, adding a demonic power to it that made people feel fear at first glance. Qin Yu's eyes lit up. This saber is not bad. How about you lend it to me? Chapter 930. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The Shora paused. Originally, this place belonged to him, and he could control everything here. However, this saber was indeed his beloved item. Previously, before he was trapped in the Azura Blood Sea, he had proudly walked the world with it. Anyone with intelligence would be incomparably terrified when they saw his beloved blade. Not a single person showed any appreciation. It was said that it was hard to find a confidant in life. Although he was the Shora, he was also incomparably lonely. I didn't expect someone to recognize it. Seeing that you can appreciate the howl, I'll lend it to you first. It seemed to be just a thought. The blade in the Shora's hand disappeared and appeared in Qin Yu's hand. Looking at it from afar, one could see how mighty and extraordinary the blade was. Now that he looked at it up close, it was even more meaningful. Although the smell of blood was extremely strong, it also carried the smell of decisive killing. Not only did it not make him feel disgusted, but he could also deeply feel how domineering this blade used to be. Just by holding this blade in his hand, it was as if the scene of countless enemies crawling under his feet appeared in front of him. It made one's heart tremble. If it was someone with a weak mind, they would have lost themselves long ago. I already understand your weakness. Although your combat strength is very strong. The reason why you are invincible is because you are born with the power to evoke the darkest thoughts in everyone's hearts. Everyone who fought against you, before the outcome was decided, they had already fallen into a demonic state. Unfortunately, this is useless against me. Perhaps many experts would not be able to maintain their rationality when facing the Shora, but he definitely would not. The Shora did not expect to be seen through so quickly. This was not under his control. If he could, he wanted to fight with others in a more open and honorable manner. However, at the same time, he enjoyed the convenience of this innate ability and the joy of fighting. The Shura's life was only filled with the need to fight. Only fighting could make his blood boil and enter a state of madness. Although he had always enjoyed the convenience of this innate ability, if there was someone who could ignore all his talents, he would have a good fight with him openly. He was still looking forward to it. Good. If you can defeat me, I will willingly submit to you. But right now, you still have to pull yourself together. The dignity of an Asura cannot be trampled on. I don't think I'll lose, even if you can resist the mental corruption. Qin Yu was only able to capture one key word from this. Perhaps mental pollution was also a kind of special ability. However, it seemed that if he wanted to use this ability, he would have to pay a certain price. First of all, he had to be able to withstand the mental pollution. If he wasn't careful, he might end up like Shura, a madman who had no sense of reason despite possessing great battle prowess. In this strange spiritual space, Qin Yu and the Asura fought over 100 rounds. Both of them won and lost. However, no one was injured. Once he had figured out all of Asura's attacking methods, he quickly gave him the final blow and completely defeated him. At this point, Shura had basically figured out his fighting style. He was also preparing his final attack, but in the end, he was still a step too late. After more than 100 rounds, the Asura was thoroughly convinced. Although there were wins and losses between the two of them, in the end, he lost more. Even if the Asura had such a great natural advantage. However, Qin Yu had only suffered some losses in the first couple of bouts. After that, he quickly found a way to deal with him. He had never suffered a single loss in terms of attack again. I'm sincerely convinced of your ability. Come, as long as you erase the will I left behind, you will get a tool that only knows how to fight and completely listens to your orders. It was almost like a puppet. In fact, it was better for him to control it himself. Although he admitted defeat, he didn't want to be a puppet under someone else's control all the time. He couldn't control what he did in the first place. Now, he was only able to control his thoughts and actions in a rare situation where he was able to do so. Since this is your own choice, I won't stop you. Qin Yu fulfilled his wish. In his lifetime, he was able to make a decision with his own will instead of being influenced and controlled by his instincts. Finally, a huge amount of information rushed directly into his mind. That was everything that every Asura slowly accepted since they were born, including the meaning of the Asura's existence. It also included the Asura's combat experience, and this was the combat experience passed down through countless generations. It turned out that all the energy and memories of every Asura would turn into a crystal. Along with the body, it would be sealed until a new Asura was born from it. Like an embryo and a sprout, the cycle repeated. This memory had always been passed down. Therefore, this information was really a little too huge. That nameless Asura wanted him to cease to exist forever, even if it was in the form of memories, he was unwilling. Therefore, after he died, everything he had was given to Qin Yu for nothing. It could be said that his inheritance as an Asura was broken. Qin Yu received the memories of countless Asuras. He personally experienced the psychological changes in their words and actions. His entire aura also became strange and strange. It seemed to be filled with killing intent. His face also changed slightly, as if it wanted to become darker red. The dark lines slowly grew from extremely fine lines and spread to all parts. At this moment, Qin Yu's body suddenly bloomed with white light mixed with green light. All the darkness around him was swept away. His aura returned to normal. Only his tyrannical strength was rising steadily. All of this was happening in a corner with no one around. The dragon soul soon sensed the scattered memories as well as the arrival of countless powerful forces. One-Eyed stared with his unique big eyes. He kept running, jumping, and screaming. Too much, too much. Enough, enough. If this goes on, I'm going to explode. Qin Yu had fallen into an extremely profound realm. He turned a deaf ear to everything in the outside world. When the airwaves around him gradually subsided, The blood pool suddenly kept rolling and surging up. And the strange red color in the outside world was also gradually fading. All the blood gradually solidified after boiling for a while, finally solidifying into a fist-sized pill. This was something that every Asura wanted to obtain at all costs. It could be used to increase their strength. And it could also strengthen their soul, allowing them to gain a short period of clarity, so it was extremely precious. Chapter 931. Immortal Soul. His body seemed to possess explosive power. The previous tempering had expanded his meridians by more than 2 times. Although his strength had increased, it also meant that it was harder for him to break through compared to ordinary people. But now, after breaking through to Immortal Soul, he continued to improve and reached mid-stage. If it was really a fist-sized solid, it would be completely refined and absorbed. He could even break through again without any damage to his foundation. Suddenly, the sky collapsed and the earth cracked. Bang, 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 bang. Dust flew and the earth split open, revealing a deep fissure. One after another, grey figures came to the fissure and looked at the blood-red sea at the bottom. There's a person there. How is this possible? Isn't this where Shio? Isn't this where that lunatic is? Look, it's not that lunatic. It's just an ordinary person who seems to have just broken through. Someone broke through in this place. The arrival of these people was too sudden. The dragon soul quickly put away the fist-sized solid. These people were all very strong. The weakest was a late-stage immortal soul expert. The strongest among them had even reached the Holy King level. But this guy was just a dish in front of the Asura. Even if all of them joined forces and attacked together, they wouldn't be able to last one round. Qin Yu walked out calmly and faced these people. Judging from their aura and attitude, Qin Yu, on the other hand, was much better than these people. In fact, he was many times stronger than them. But this place, which they thought was a land of death, where there shouldn't be anyone at all, suddenly appeared a living person who wasn't weak. The shock in these people's hearts could be imagined. After all, this was a place recognized by the Asura Academy. If someone came here, no matter how strong they were, even if they were about to break through the Holy King level and reach the next realm, they would still silently die here. This was an ironclad fact that countless seniors used their flesh and blood to prove to them. Among them, the strongest one was also a little braver. Not sensing any Asura's aura, he directly jumped into the fissure and waited for a moment before returning with a relaxed expression. He didn't find any Asura's aura at all. This meant that, at least for the time being, Asura would not appear. Asura might have even left this place. He endured it again and again, and only then did he not laugh out loud. With such a dangerous person by his side, no one could be at ease. Although it was possible that he had run to someone else's side, as long as he didn't come to their side, who would care? Have you ever seen a pool of blood there? They had already recognized Qin Yu as a passerby. He didn't even have the slightest suspicion. This was because as long as one stepped onto this land, they would be unable to control their own actions. When he woke up again, he would die. This was a very normal thing. In the past, countless people had died here for this reason. Therefore, none of them suspected Qin Yu. Since they didn't suspect anything, Qin Yu didn't bother to explain. He only said that he was already like this when he arrived. Then, he allowed them to analyze and figure out what was going on. On the other hand, he had succeeded in his mission and retreated. Perhaps this would become another topic of conversation in Tianju. But it had nothing to do with him anymore. No one knew that he was the one who did it, and no one would suspect him. Everyone would just think that there was an inexplicable change. The few people who had been left behind by him didn't stop talking. He disappeared so cleanly. Maybe he died. What kind of expert could kill such a powerful existence? Maybe this is an expert above the Holy King level. Although such an existence is rare, maybe there is a 1 in 10 million chance of passing through here. Anyway, as long as the Shura disappears from our territory, he won't have any influence on us anymore. As long as we don't say anything, even if that guy appears elsewhere, who would think that it's us? It was obvious that even if these people had guesses in their hearts, they wouldn't say it out loud. They couldn't wait to push this hot potato out of their hands as soon as possible. They didn't care at all who took this hot potato. However, not long after, an expert arrived. Seeing the Shura blood sea that was devoid of any blood, he looked up to the sky and roared, "Who is it? Who destroyed the Shura that I painstakingly cultivated? I spent 1,000 years to find the seed of Shura. And I spent countless years to cultivate the energy here to such a rich level. No matter who you are, I, the Blood Moon Patriarch, will not rest until you die." Qin Yu vaguely heard these voices. But because it was too far away, he couldn't hear them clearly. He didn't stop at all. It didn't matter what kind of trouble he would attract in the future. If a god came, he would kill the god. Even if the heavenly Tao wanted to kill him, it had to ask if he was willing to be controlled by others. He had many things in his hands now. But he didn't know how to use them for a while. Forget about the solid body, it was a crystallization of some kind of special energy. Slowly meditating and absorbing could increase one's strength, but he felt that this thing should have some special function. But what he was most interested in was the corpse of the expert that he brought out with him. It had extremely weak breathing. That's right, it was just a corpse. Originally, he thought that the expert was still alive, but then he realized that the consciousness inside had long been erased by someone. It only had a strong appearance. Anyone would be able to control this body. But there was a troublesome thing. If there was no special way to take it for one's own use. If one wanted to control this corpse to make simple movements, it would require an extremely large amount of energy. Qin Yu's strength had already surpassed people of the same level by too much. But even if he wanted to control this body and make some simple movements according to his thoughts, he felt extremely tired. Book of Revelation, tell me how to use this body for my own use. The book spirit trembled in fear. It didn't dare to hesitate or neglect and quickly began to flip the pages of the book. Not long after, a blank page was revealed. It was a little surprised and tried again, but in the end, it was still blank. On the third try, there was finally a word. But it was just a word. Here. Qin Yu was able to tell the meaning behind this word. He told the book spirit to stop flipping for the time being. If his guess was correct, he should have something that could quantify the body of this sentence. Chapter 932. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. After thinking about it, he realized that he had too many things on hand. If it was among the piles of waste, it would be even more difficult to find it. Therefore, the Book of Revelation was not completely useful. At most, it could give him a general direction, but it could not accurately point out the details. Since I can't find it for now, I'll leave it to fate. By the way, what is this thing? Can you tell? Although it was only a general direction, it was at least much better than being confused. 2 words appeared on the Book of Revelation, accompanied by a simple picture. Blood amber. The picture was the thing in Qin Yu's hand. It did not even change it. As for the use of the blood amber, it did not say anything at all. It seems that I have to find an appraiser to appraise it for me. You're too useless. The book spirit became depressed. In fact, it still had a very big use. Its previous owners all relied on it to survive. But now, it had met a master who was much stronger than it. It could not even play a role. It was such a rare and precious treasure, yet it had become a dispensable item of little value. Qin Yu put away all his things and walked to the next city. It was not that he did not have anything else to take, but the next city was right in front of him. After coming in this time, he went straight to a very famous trading house and asked for an appraisal. You're just here to do an appraisal? Little Yang, go ahead. The last person to be sent was a girl who looked like a novice. The immaturity and childishness on her face had not faded. Seeing that Qin Yu was a little flustered, she even accidentally touched the thing in her hand. She hurriedly picked it up, lowered her head in embarrassment, and said in an extremely weak voice, "Okay. I don't think she's suitable. Such a flustered person can't even be an apprentice." The appraisal fee was usually a few thousandths of the value of the appraised item. Therefore, if a pile of useless trash was appraised, the reward would be extremely low. The man who served Qin Yu looked indifferent. Although he was just a new apprentice, it was enough for him to appraise some ordinary items. If the item wasn't considered trash, then it would be fine to change it at the last minute. In any case, he was just an apprentice. He could do whatever he wanted with just a word. Qin Yu was not going to change to another place because this was the only place with the best appraisers. If he went to other places, he might not have the eyesight to recognize what he was holding. He didn't need a group of people who didn't have good eyesight to help him appraise. Since he was looking for someone, he would look for the best. I'm just afraid that you won't be able to afford to appraise the things I take out. Not to mention an apprentice, even the best appraiser here might not be able to appraise what I've taken out. He was narrating a fact. He spoke in an extremely calm tone. The man who had been serving the guests in the hall was a little angry. But he didn't have time to get angry. An old and calm voice came from behind. His attitude towards the guests was too much. And from now on, he was not allowed to join the trading house. No trading house in Tianju would allow him to serve as a receptionist. The old man who appeared later first looked up and down at Qin Yu. His eyes flickered slightly. Then he asked him in a kind and calm tone what he wanted to appraise. And he introduced himself. He was the most powerful and experienced appraiser in this trading house. Don't boast. After all, I have seen thousands of sales. Not to say that I have seen everything in this world, but I think I know half of the things in this world. And the things that this old man hasn't seen are mostly too rare and too precious. Qin Yu had some doubts about the appraiser of this trading house. He simply took out some ordinary things. These things were relatively rare. Especially the Kang Dragon soft armor that he retired. The quality was already good. Speaking of which, for the current him, the effect was very weak. But the Kang Dragon had been extinct for many years. If this old appraiser couldn't even recognize this, then he would have to doubt the appraiser's ability. So he didn't hesitate to go to another trading house and find a more experienced appraiser. This did have some interference with the old man. After all, the Kang Dragon had been extinct for tens of thousands of years. He just looked at it with his special eyes. Based on his experience, he judged that it should be made by some kind of dragon with a lot of effort. Some of the details were done perfectly. It was a pity that the materials used were somewhat inferior. So it wasn't considered very high quality in the immortal world. It wasn't until the end that he slowly judged that it should be a relic made by some kind of ancient dragon. Although he didn't accurately say the name of the Kang Dragon. But just based on this strictness, this experience, it was enough to prove that he did have some ability and wasn't a pretentious guy who only knew how to show off. Qin Yu smiled and made an inviting gesture. After all, there were many things in this world that weren't suitable to appear in front of everyone. So appraisals were often done in an extremely sealed room that could block everyone's prying eyes. This was the only way to safely make appraisals. The old appraiser knew this a long time ago, so he tacitly followed. But very quickly, he saw something that would shock him for the rest of his life. He dared to swear that even before he died, he would remember everything he saw today. When he finally came out, his face was full of shame. I am so sorry. I cannot do this appraisal. The item you took out is far too valuable and rare. Even I can only make some simple judgments, but I can't determine his origin. Qin Yu already knew that such a thing might happen. Thus, his state of mind was still relatively calm. But to everyone else, this could not be described as shocking. The old appraiser was the best appraiser they had here, and he was famous in the entire Tianju. But there were still things he couldn't identify. Though the old man said that he could recognize half of the items in the world, he could still identify the origin of every item that was placed before him. Therefore, everyone thought that he was omniscient. But today, what did they witness? They witnessed the old appraiser, one of the best appraisers in Tianju, say he couldn't identify anything. Chapter 933. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. I just wanted to give it a try. This result is expected. Qin Yu was a little helpless. He stepped out of the door and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. He left the education department and countless people looking at him. This was already one of the best appraisers in Tianju, but it still couldn't be appraised. It was expected. What kind of existence was that? The old appraiser still had some prestige, so no one took the initiative to rush up and surround him. But under everyone's fervent gazes, he still spoke slowly. That is an extremely precious item. I can't tell you the details. You just need to know that you can't offend that person. While everyone in the trading house was guessing, the old appraiser returned to his special isolation room and quietly stayed there for a while. He had to calm down. After all, he had just faced a powerhouse close to a true god. Even if it was just a corpse that still had pressure, he couldn't take it. He didn't even dare to look at it, let alone appraise it. Even after the powerhouse's corpse was put away, he couldn't even appraise a single piece of blood amber. He could only see the effects of the medicine, but he couldn't see anything about its origin or reason. What kind of powerful existence could have so many treasures in his hands? He didn't dare to imagine it. Even his reverence for Qin Yu had been raised. After that, he would pretend that nothing had happened. Otherwise, if someone came to find him, those related to that kind of thing weren't existences that a small trading house like theirs could fight against. Not long after Qin Yu left, this transaction house directly closed its doors. And it closed for a long time. It wasn't until the commotion outside gradually subsided that someone noticed that the trading house seemed to have changed its address and was no longer here. Even the top appraisers in Tianju didn't dare to appraise it. It could be seen that these people's abilities were limited. Forget about the body of a true god, it was already extremely powerful. Normal people couldn't even get close to it, let alone look at it directly. But the blood amber had such a mysterious origin. Even the experienced old appraiser couldn't see it. One could well imagine how precious it was. Since no one can make an accurate appraisal, then why don't I just follow my heart? Instead of spending too much time on finding an appraiser, he might as well take a gamble. If he failed, it would cause all the precious things in his hands to become useless. These two treasures had an extraordinary origin and were very powerful. Perhaps they would become useless and never be used again. But he couldn't just sit and wait. Anything he wanted to do, he had to pay a price. If he didn't take any risks, he wouldn't be able to get what he wanted. Only the book spirit wanted to protest. But no one cared. Qin Yu was taking a gamble. The one that allowed him to refine this expert's body and use it as his clone. The blood amber. Was the blood amber in his hands? He knew everything to translation of all the items to translation. These two things Lu Wan was he didn't know it's it. Although it was just a gamble, he had more than 70% confidence in his heart. The amber too of the blood translation is his translation. But the blood essence contained in it was extremely rich. That was the energy that Azura had accumulated for God knows how many years. God knows how many powerhouses had died here, and their flesh and blood had been turned into nutrients. And all of these nutrients finally condensed into this fist-sized pill. If the power inside was released and turned into an attack, it would be enough to destroy the world. In this extremely spacious area, a towering figure stood tall like a mountain. A trace of aura leaked out from its body, which was enough to make people feel awe. The two energies, one strong and one ordinary, collided and approached each other. Finally, when they reached the Dragon Lake, they caused the mountains to collapse and the earth to crack, causing dust to fly, and causing the sky to turn into a deep dark light. When the ball of blood light merged into the space between the dragon's eyebrows, heaven and earth collapse. All laws were broken. The power to destroy heaven and earth was constantly brewing, as if a true god had descended. Everyone who was watching from afar from the periphery. At the same time, their hearts trembled, and their meridians were damaged to varying degrees. They were forced to spit out a mouthful of heart blood, and their auras were extremely weak. But even if they were seriously injured, they didn't dare to go over. In the past, they were all arrogant and domineering, and they were powerhouses who used their own strength to do whatever they wanted. Now that they saw an even more terrifying existence, they felt fear in their hearts. They even came up with a rather absurd thought. Could it be that another true God realm powerhouse had descended? But how many years had it been since the last time a true God realm powerhouse had appeared? People of their generation could only see the era of true gods a few dozen generations ago. At that time, powerhouses were everywhere, and immortals were nothing at all. Even saint kings had to sit on the ground, and they could only live in a small place. Could it be that the legendary era of cultivators is coming? Such a powerful aura. I have to quickly go into seclusion, inform everyone that I'm going out to travel, and during this period of time, everyone has to tuck their tails between their legs. They must not do any more arrogant actions, lest they bring disaster to our sect. Tianju was a mess. All the powerhouses were either in seclusion or going out. Even those who were weaker and had worldly things on them would choose to have all their people stay in seclusion, and try to be as humble as possible. Even if they encountered something, they would tacitly stop what they were doing. People from two big clans were about to start fighting, and all the powerhouses were out. The younger generation were all extremely arrogant and domineering. But until the strongest powerhouses of the two clans suddenly spat out a mouthful of heart blood. They looked at each other, shook hands, and stopped talking to each other. At this moment, under the cover of this powerful aura, nobody dared to make any unnecessary movement. One of the trading houses was covered by this powerful aura and quickly moved out. Who told them to know so much? If they were investigated later, they would be stuck between the powerhouses and those with ill intentions. They would be in so much pain that they would rather die. The disturbance in Tianju had nothing to do with Qin Yu. He looked at the powerhouse's body very seriously. He slowly reached out his hand. The majestic dragon head suddenly shook its whiskers. Chapter 934. Bright golden vertical pupils. It was as if two golden pillars of light had appeared. Everyone who met his gaze bowed their heads in submission. Qin Yu looked at this world from a different perspective, and he had a different feeling in his heart. His aura grew even stronger. During this enlightenment, he broke through a small realm. Wherever the strong passed, all the weak were just ants that they could play with as they pleased. The strong possessed unparalleled strength. It was as if the entire world had become a toy in their hands. However, this extremely powerful feeling could only last for a very short period of time. Soon, because the energy in his body was on the verge of exhaustion. The movements of the enormous body that Qin Yu was controlling were visibly decreasing in agility. Each and every one of its movements had become a lot stiffer than before. However, even if the strength of the true god-level clone had decreased by quite a bit, it was enough to fight against Senzun and below. If he could obtain enough energy to support his strength, he could even erupt with a formidable strength that was invincible beneath the true divinity realm. However, in order to possess such heaven-defying power, the amount of energy required was also extremely large. Ordinary resources had almost no effect on this true dragon god's shell. It was only because the power of the blood amber was strong enough that it could awaken this body and allow Qin Yu to control it. However, although the power in the blood amber was strong, a lot of it had been used up when the body was awakened. It was an extremely powerful feeling, as if the world was nothing but ants in his eyes. It only lasted for a split second. The huge vertical pupil closed. Qin Yu opened his eyes at the same time. You are powerful, but the price you have to pay is also very high. I can use it as a trump card at a critical moment. Perhaps when I comprehend the Tao, using such a body will be of great help. Just now, that extremely profound feeling had brought him a breakthrough. If this were to happen a few more times, especially when his strength was stuck at a certain point and could not break through, he would definitely be able to do it. As long as he had the slightest comprehension, he would be able to cross that barrier in one fell swoop. Perhaps there were other uses for it, but he would have to explore them one by one. The Raingi's body was just an empty shell. There were no memories at all, nor were there any inheritances unique to the Dragon Clan. Under such a blank situation, he could only take one step at a time. But in the end, he still gained a lot. Even if he were to face the strongest expert in the entire immortal world, he would still be able to defeat the strongest expert in the immortal world. He was also confident that he could face the other party head-on. After the earth-shattering scene slowly disappeared, it still left behind a scene of devastation. Presumably, It would take a long time for this place to slowly recover. Moreover, there was always a trace of an expert's aura left behind here. As a result, countless small animals did not dare to settle down in this area. Qin Yu waved his sleeve, clasped his hands behind his back, and slowly walked out of the land. With every step he took, the remnant aura of the powerhouse weakened a little. When he finally left this land, the remaining aura here was already extremely weak. It wouldn't be long before countless lives would slowly settle down here. This place would not become a deserted land of death. In fact, because of the protection of the aura of the strong, it would even become a paradise for the weak. For a very long time, this place would become a forbidden area that everyone avoided like the plague. Achoo! Seems like someone is talking about me. Shentian Senzun rubbed his slightly itchy nose as he stood on this barren land. I don't believe that you won't come out of here. Countless years have passed. Do you really think that I will forget what happened back then because of the passage of time? Stop joking. It's impossible. Do you want to come out yourself, or do you want me to go in and drag you out? After a while, a transparent figure faintly appeared. Looking at Shentian Senzun, his eyes were filled with complicated emotions and indescribable anger. He was not willing to come out at all, but he was forced to the point that he had no choice. It's been so long since what happened back then, and it didn't cause much harm to you. I already said that I didn't do it on purpose. What else do you want to do to me? Seeing him come out, Shentian Senzun directly slapped out with his palm, and a translucent belt of light appeared in his hand, directly binding the translucent figure. Did he really think that he couldn't catch him just because he split out a strand of divine consciousness? Little did he know that there were many ways to trap divine consciousness in this world, and he just happened to have the strongest one in his hands. Not long after, in this barren land, screams resounded through the sky. After a long time, it slowly calmed down. After teaching this guy a lesson, Shentian Senzun quickly rushed to the next location. Even if this guy didn't directly participate in the incident back then, who asked the masterminds back then to be punished one by one? They didn't even have time to wait for him to personally take action, and all of them died before they could live. If he wanted to take back the things that he had back then, he could only knock on their doors one by one. If they wanted to blame someone, they could only blame themselves for secretly hiding his things. How could his things be so easy to take? His title as the strongest Senzun in the ninefold god realm wasn't for nothing. They were accumulated through countless battles, countless pieces of flesh and blood, and countless painful lessons from countless people. Now, what was in his hands was an extremely small and exquisite copper bell. But the strange thing was that no matter how he shook it, it definitely wouldn't make the slightest sound. This was a famous treasure in the entire ninefold god realm. God-shocking bell. And its function was extremely powerful. Not only could it be used as a defensive tool, but it could also be used to constantly alert the surroundings of existences that could threaten one's life. It could also be used as a treasure to intimidate the enemy at a critical moment. It could move one's heart and soul, such a powerful treasure that could almost attack and defend as one was naturally worth a lot. In the entire ninefold god realm, there was only one of it. This treasure isn't very useful to me, but it's also quite useful to Qin Yu. At least for a short period of time, it's still worthy of his strength. Looks like I have to hurry up. Otherwise, I'll be anxious when he can't find it anywhere. Qin Yu knew how powerful his master was. If he were to be slightly arrogant, in the entire ninefold god realm, the number of people who could be a match for Shentian Senzun could be counted on one hand. If there were some old monsters who wouldn't be in trouble, then they wouldn't be included in this calculation. But even if they were extremely powerful old monsters, Shentian Senzun could still roll up his sleeves and spar with them. Chapter 935. Now that he had Shentian Senzun's whereabouts, he had to find another person. He wasn't sure if that person was in the celestial realm or somewhere else. Maybe I should make a big commotion. Let all the big sects in the celestial realm boil over. Let all the experts gather, and let them bring some juniors. One by one, he added conditions to it. Soon, a rough idea appeared in his mind. Wouldn't it be easy to cause a commotion in the celestial realm? As long as he was strong enough, strength was everyone's eternal pursuit. Right now, he already had an extremely powerful body as his clone. He wanted to create a huge commotion that would make everyone in the immortal world look askance and even go crazy over it. Wouldn't that be as easy as flipping one's hand? Others wouldn't even dare to think about it, but for him, all the conditions had been met. A sudden rumor quickly spread to all the states in the celestial realm. Everyone in the celestial realm. They all knew that an unparalleled expert was about to be born. He was unprecedentedly strong. He had even touched the threshold of the true God realm. He was about to step into the legendary supreme realm, and before he stepped into the true God realm, he had to pass on the Tao to the person he liked, and stay in seclusion until he broke through to the true immortal realm. Since then, it could be said that his lineage hadn't been broken. This rumor seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Even if they sent people to investigate, they couldn't find the source. In the end, they could only find a few storytellers wandering around the various states. But although each of them had a beginning and an end, it was as if they had seen it with their own eyes. If they asked carefully, they would only say that someone told them to say so. As for who that person was, sorry, they didn't see it clearly. They just wanted to do their own thing. After all, the story was exciting enough. If they told it, it would attract a lot of people to listen to their story. In this way, they had already earned a lot of money. Who would care about the truth of the story? Originally, this rumor was only spread among the weak. But the matter in Tianju was reported to some of the big sects. Even the powerful upper echelons of the large sects had no choice but to pay attention to it. Could it be that a super expert close to the true God realm had appeared, and he had made up his mind to hand over his inheritance and recruit disciples? Moreover, it didn't matter if that disciple was sent by them or not. Just by looking at fate, it was as if he was trying to verify their thoughts. The place in Tianju that was known as the Land of Gods. A huge and faintly discernible mountain and river appeared. No one could touch these mountains and rivers of nothingness. However, they could see an illusory shadow in the mountains and rivers. It gradually solidified and appeared in front of everyone with a disdainful aura. In an instant, all the people present were fiercely pressed to the ground, and they could not even raise their heads. All he could see was a flash of a dragon tail. It was actually a powerful dragon race expert. All of the dragons who had rushed over upon hearing the news couldn't help but reveal excited expressions. Since it was a senior of the dragon clan, perhaps this inheritance would belong to the dragon clan. Compared to the other messy and weak races, the dragon race had a huge advantage. Furthermore, they were all dragons, so they should have been chosen. His cold and emotionless eyes swept over the weak people who were crawling on the ground. Perhaps these people all had their own identities, and they were overlords or experts with high status in some large forces. However, as long as they were in front of him, they could only crawl at his feet. There was no other choice. Now, you have appeared in front of me. You should all be here for my inheritance. At a rough estimate, there are at least thousands of people. And I know that there are hundreds of thousands of people waiting outside. But among so many people, I will only choose one person. After hearing the requirements for the candidate, only the humans, and the Bishua Mountain who were extremely good at cold beauties, were the happiest. Because relatively speaking, their chances were much higher than the others, and even compared to the people of the major sects and forces of all the races present. Qin Yu was only here to find Shualan this time. It would be best if he could find her. If this move didn't let him find her, perhaps he would have to consider going to the other realms to look for her. He even saw people from the Shentian sect. To be able to come in front of him, it should also be a sect master. At least his strength could be said to be at the peak of perfection. Although he did not break through Senzun's realm, it seemed that he was not far away. In the eyes of the powerful current sect master of the Shentian sect, he saw doubts and deeply hidden doubts. Doubts about whether this so-called inheritance was real or fake. Doubts about his sudden appearance. Moreover, his strength was said to be a powerful expert who was close to the true God realm. Was it real or fake? Could all of this be a conspiracy caused by someone? After all, although everyone now saw this expert appear in person. However, they did not exactly feel the terror of the expert. As for the so-called inheritance of the expert, they only heard about it but did not see it. Even though Qin Yu noticed it, he merely smiled and let it pass. However, he stopped for a while on the Shentian sect master and was accurately noticed by many experts. Then, all kinds of gazes fell on the Shentian sect master. Most of these gazes were filled with malicious intent. Although the Shentian sect could be said to be extremely prestigious among the humans, there were also powerful dragons present. Naturally, they also had their own territory and sneered at the so-called rules of the human race. Since they already had doubts in their hearts, they were already prepared to ask in private later, no matter what method they used. They wanted to see if they could get any results from the current sect master of the Shentian sect. After all, which one of them present was not an expert who had fought for more than 10,000 years? Although they had submitted to such a powerful oppressive might, they still had their doubts. However, there were very few who directly doubted the existence of this expert like the Shentian sect master. At most, they only doubted the authenticity of this inheritance and the purpose of this expert who appeared out of nowhere. Could it be that he really just wanted to find a beautiful fairy who cultivated the supreme unruffled emotions Tao? Just thinking about it made one realize that such a powerful existence would not stop for a mere fairy. As for making such a big scene, it was even more unlikely. Who would have thought that such a big event that shook the immortal world was really just someone who wanted to borrow their hands to find a friend that they had not seen for many years? Chapter 936. Countless experts were toyed with in the palm of his hand. Even if they had doubts, they didn't dare to speak lightly. In the face of strength, all the schemes and hypocrisy were fragile. They were even more fragile than paper. I'll only give you 3 days. After 3 days, if there's still no one who meets my conditions and meets my eyes, then I'll go into seclusion immediately. If I really can't find a suitable person within 3 days, then it means that I'm not fated to have a disciple. And I won't be able to pass down all of my strength. Pass down all of it. The nearby relatives were so excited that they started to tremble. Even if they didn't meet the conditions, as long as they could find someone who did, and get closer to them. One could imagine how shocking the entire inheritance of such a powerful existence was. That represented countless natural treasures, endless opportunities, and the supreme great Tao. Looking at how powerful this expert was, and how he was even going into seclusion to break through to the legendary true God realm. They knew that this supreme great Tao could at least allow them to break through to the true God realm. But every single person, if they wanted to take in a disciple, they would more or less keep it. They definitely wouldn't pass down all of their things, all of their experience, and all of their wealth in one go like this. At the very least, they would have to go through a long period of assessment, take in a few disciples, and choose the most outstanding and the most suitable among them. Only then would they choose to pass down a portion of the important things. After all, if they raised an ingrate, it might harm them. This wasn't worth it. But now, they met an unprecedented expert. This time, he appeared only to pass down everything he had. Then, he would break through to a higher realm without any worries. Everything was very reasonable. So much so that everyone temporarily forgot their suspicions just now. Anyway, they were just looking for people. As long as they found enough people, would there be no need to worry that no one could inherit this inheritance? The conditions that Qin Yu gave could be said to be quite detailed. In a short period of time, all the fairies who cultivated the Tao of the Great Oblivion were found. They became the hot topic of discussion. It was as if every fairy who cultivated the Tao of the Great Oblivion. They could all be the peerless experts that they needed to curry favor with in the future. Xuelan didn't have the slightest interest in the so-called expert's inheritance. She cultivated the Tao of the Great Oblivion. He had been cultivating since he was young. When he came to the immortal world, he didn't even take a step out. He was often immersed in cultivation and was unable to extricate himself. 1,000 years passed in the blink of an eye. Fairy Xuelan's name wasn't very outstanding in the outside world. Only the inner circle of the sect knew what the Xuelan mountain represented. He was the most outstanding genius in the past 10,000 years. Everyone knew that he was a peerless genius who had truly comprehended the true essence of the supreme unruffled emotions Tao. She had already comprehended the true essence of the path of the Great Oblivion. Although she was still young and had not completely cultivated it to the extreme, she was still deaf to external things. It was just that the Tao of the Great Oblivion was truly extremely profound. Even her current master was unable to completely eliminate everything in the world. In the end, she was tempted by this treasure that might represent a huge amount of wealth and resources. Moreover, to the others, they already had many fairies who specialized in the Tao of the Great Oblivion. Xuelan was the most outstanding of them all, and she was also the one she had the highest hopes for. As long as you can obtain this inheritance, even if you don't use it yourself, you can give it to others to contribute to the sect. With such a great contribution, when the time comes, countless resources and even a respected status can all be given to you. To the sect, you are also a meritorious person with a high status and can enjoy everyone's respect. Fairy Xuanling tried her best to persuade him. She really didn't have anything bad to say to this disciple. However, Fairy Xuelan's strength was too high, and her talent was too outstanding. As a master, she couldn't do anything in the end. She could only watch her disciple step by step stand shoulder to shoulder with her, and even a little higher. Although she was proud of her disciple, when facing her exceptionally outstanding disciple, she often had a strict attitude. Otherwise, she didn't even think that she could be the master of such a person who was like ice and snow. The pressure from the sect was already slowly pressing down on her head like Mount Tai. It seemed that as long as she said the word no, she would be going against the entire sect. Xuelan's curly eyelashes trembled slightly. After opening her eyes, they revealed clear ice-blue pupils. Her snow-like long hair was incomparably gorgeous. It made her seem like ice, but also like jade. Cold and holy, and thousands of miles away. However, no one could doubt her beauty. Even though they had seen each other for many years, Fairy Xuanling still almost couldn't come back to her senses. Then a burst of ecstasy gushed out. It seems that you agree. I've already asked people to pack up. You can come with me now. No need, Master. This is also the last time I call you Master. Xuelan cultivated the great path of Great Oblivion. She didn't care about anything or anyone around her. So even if it was her master who had accompanied her for many years, to her, it was no different from a stone by the roadside. So the inheritance of the so-called powerhouse has no use to me. But I can't disobey Master's orders. After thinking for a long time, I finally came up with a foolproof plan. From today onwards, Xuelan will withdraw from Mount Bishue. From today onwards, there will be no friendship at all. While Fairy Xuanling was still in a daze, Xuelan spoke again. As my last contribution to the sect, Xuelan will do what Master said just now. If I really get the so-called inheritance and resources, I will also give them all to you. It's a return of the kindness that the sect has shown me over the past 10,000 years. But it could be considered a clean break. Fairy Xuanling opened her mouth but couldn't say anything to persuade her to stay. She could only watch the icy blue flowing light disappear in front of her eyes. She still couldn't come back to her senses. In fact, she had already expected today's result. But she didn't expect. It happened so quickly. Qin Yu controlled the doppelganger to return to the void. He waited for the 3 days to slowly pass by in boredom. In the first 2 days, a lot of people were sent over. But after a cursory glance, he didn't find the person he was looking for. So he drove them out without hesitation. Even the powerhouses of the major forces who sent these imposters were driven out. It was already the 3rd day. It was also the time he set for the last day. If he didn't get anything today, all the people present would have to pay the price. After all, he never did anything for nothing. Chapter 937. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. An icy blue ray of light flashed past and crossed thousands of miles in the blink of an eye. Since Xuelan was focused on rushing, she did not make any stops along the way and focused on controlling the direction. In just half a day's time, she made it to the deadline. The moment her eyes met the cold vertical pupils, Xuelan's heart, which had not moved for thousands of years, suddenly trembled slightly. This familiar feeling, could it be that he had returned? Since there is no suitable candidate, Qin Yu was about to announce the final result. Suddenly, he saw a ray of light flash across the sky. Furthermore, his clone was able to see Xuelan's appearance again after 10,000 years had passed. She looked almost the same as she did 10,000 years ago. The only thing missing was the naivety she had when she was with him. She looked like a piece of high-quality 1,000-year-old cold jade. Her entire body was clear and flawless, and she emitted an extremely cold light. If anyone tried to get close, their hands would be full of frost. The person he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Since that was the case, there was no need for these so-called experts who were crawling at his feet to exist. Then all of you can go to hell. The powerful aura first affected the few people around. It made them unable to move. Before they could react, it quickly killed the few people who were at the Holy King level. The remaining people all wanted to leave. But not long after they flew away, a powerful force suddenly sucked away every ounce of strength in their bodies. They could not even fly and finally fell to the ground pathetically. It was as if there was an invisible hand in the sky, controlling their every move when they were frightened. It made them unable to resist. Where is my strength? What did you do, demon? Cough. I can't feel my strength. How can this be? I already said that there must be a conspiracy behind this. Where did this expert come from? Why would he take out his inheritance for no reason? Help, please let me out. I have no value at all. Look at those leaders of the big sects, they must be more valuable. Under the awe of such a powerful force, everyone more or less showed expressions that they would never show on a normal day. Some were furious, some were weak, some were sarcastic, and some were even begging for mercy. Everyone had different expressions. But Xuelan, who came later, was not affected at all. It was as if she did not exist at all. Not only that, but she also felt an unprecedented sense of security in this place. It was as if this expert who suddenly appeared could give her a sense of security. Her sense of security was in stark contrast to the sorry state of these experts. But she did not care about these unrelated people. Her eyes and heart were filled with the shock that the pair of vertical pupils had brought her. It was as if the person she was hidden in those cold eyes. The person she was, the person who she was most. Is it him? He has finally come to find me. I have waited for someone for him for 10,000 years. Even if everyone tells me that he's not coming back, Su Qingsang said. But I know that no matter what kind of danger he encounters along the way, he will be able to overcome it and look down on the world with absolute strength. Even the way of heaven is not in his eyes, so I don't believe in fate. I believe he will come to find me one day. I don't want to ask anything now. I just want you to tell me if he is back. Xuelan's eyes were filled with excitement and shyness, as well as the most hidden panic. The snow-like person seemed to have melted, turned into a wisp of spring breeze. It quietly blew away the frost on her body, bringing with it a budding vitality. With every step he took, the ice on her body seemed to disappear. By the time he got close, his eyes were already slightly red. The huge body with a terrifying aura slowly fell. His pupils, which caused everyone to be shocked, closed. But behind this huge body, there was a huge figure. Instead, a handsome young man with a face like a star walked out. Every strand of hair was the one Xuelan was most familiar with. It was even engraved in her heart over the past 10,000 years. She had too many things to say, but in the end, thousands of words only turned into one sentence: welcome back. Even if 10,000 years had passed. But to her, as long as she could see this person again, what was the big deal? Countless years of obsession had been broken. Xuelan actually ignored the surrounding environment and broke through in one fell swoop. She reached the late stage of immortal spirit. The aura on her body seemed to be more ethereal. But it lacked a trace of coldness and ruthlessness. Yes, I'm back. I'm here to find you. It wasn't an easy task to find you. I gathered almost all the experts in the sect and asked them to use most of the power in the immortal world. Only then did I barely manage to find you at the last moment. But now they are useless. It's time to let them play some of their remaining value. The faintly discernible feeling of being controlled became stronger. Qin Yu had modified the array again and again, and he had put in a lot of precious materials. At this time, it was already heaven and earth different from the array she had obtained at the beginning. Even the most powerful experts in the immortal world would be under her control under this formation. Because his clone was stronger than them. This was the most obvious characteristic of the array. Even if he was stronger than the other party would not be able to break free. If you want to live, take the reward and redeem your life. Every 2 hours, I will randomly slap a person to death. Now, the competition begins. For these people from the big sects, they wanted to transfer a portion of the resources within 2 hours. It was definitely not a difficult task. It couldn't be more easy. In the first 2 hours, they still had some hope. They weren't able to send a large amount of resources in the first place. Qin Yu directly killed a person with a casual slap. In his opinion, the one who was the most thievish. He seemed to be someone who wanted to take advantage of the situation to get to the end. And he actually wanted to take the opportunity to inform the outside world and bring people to attack here. He wanted to tear a hole in this array from the outside. Killing such a person who caused trouble was just the right thing to do. After that, the remaining people became much more obedient. After the 4th hour, the resources that were placed over had piled up like a mountain. These resources quickly disappeared into thin air and were put away by Qin Yu. As more and more resources appeared, they were continuously sent to his hands. One by one, people began to be released. They saw with their own eyes that someone took out a large sum of money to redeem themselves. The others immediately paid a hefty price to redeem themselves. Chapter 938. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. In the end, only a small number of people remained. These people had been abandoned. They no longer had any value. The life and death of all of you is in my hands. Everyone was silent. They watched as the people around them left one by one. But the people they contacted still didn't come. Some of them had already made up their minds to spread the news of what had happened here. But now, all of them turned into anger for being deceived. If they weren't rescued, in that case, wouldn't they also end up like those broken corpses on the ground? Xuelan didn't show any mercy from the beginning to the end. Why should she show mercy to people she didn't care about? Moreover, these people had rushed here because of the greed in their hearts. Even if they died, it was their choice. Another 2 hours passed. This time, there were no more people sending things over. This meant that the remaining group of people had all been abandoned. The people who had been abandoned could already foresee their fate. But no one was willing. Do you want to leave? Unexpectedly, Qin Yu didn't kill them directly. Even if he wanted to kill these people now, it would only take a single thought. Who didn't want to leave? Staying would only mean facing death. And they all wanted to go out and question those people in the sect. Why did they give up on them? Why did they make such a choice? If you want to leave, you have to pay a certain price. They swore with their lifetime cultivation that they would never betray the alliance. They would be Qin Yu's servant for life. They swore to be loyal to him and never betray him. In exchange for a chance to live. It was just a contract. Most people chose to sign it. Although they had to be servants for life, it didn't say that they couldn't have a little selfishness. So it wasn't completely unacceptable. At least, it was many times better than death. After someone took the lead, many people took the initiative to sign the contract one after another. Some people even decided to completely betray their sect and join Qin Yu's sect, making the contract even more perfect. But without exception, they were all rejected. All the strange phenomena in the sky disappeared in an instant. Regardless of whether it was the shocking illusory figure or the extremely terrifying and powerful aura. Xuelan disappeared with that expert. After 10,000 years, they finally met again. However, it was as if there wasn't that much time between the two of them. In less than half a month. The matter of the true God experts. Very few people knew about it. Under the situation where all the sects took action to suppress them at the same time. There was less and less news circulating in the outside world. Whenever someone brought up this matter, it would be quickly suppressed. The person who brought up this matter either disappeared or never mentioned it again. With all the major forces taking action at the same time, the various rumors and slanders in the immortal world were suppressed. However, this alone was enough to cause great damage to all the top forces in the immortal world. Not only did they lose a large amount of resources and extremely valuable wealth, but they also lost a large amount of resources. There was also the anger of being deceived. He climbed to the top of an iceberg. After much effort, a figure finally climbed to the top of the mountain and saw the two figures. He turned a blind eye to Shualan beside him. A pair of blood-red eyes stared at Qin Yu. His extremely hoarse voice was laced with madness. "I've finally found you." Qin Yu felt an aura from him that was almost the same origin as that of the blood amber. As expected, with Azura's completely irrational brain, how could he be so lucky as to nurture such a powerful and mysterious treasure? There was indeed someone behind this matter, and this person's strength could be considered very good. It was rare for him to feel a sense of threat. It was as if the person in front of him could really cause great harm to him. "Cause great harm to me? I know why you're here, but I've already used it. What can you do to me? What can you do to me?" It looked even more powerful than Azura, and it didn't look like a humanoid blood demon. Hearing these words, his nose almost went crooked from anger. He had already spent a lot of effort to be able to track it down. But now he was being told that it had already been used. Impossible. I'm the only one who knows the use of that thing. I can't even guarantee that it can be used to its full potential, and you're telling me that you've already used it. As a blood demon, he had been lurking in the dark. Wasn't it to prevent the previous powerful blood demons from being besieged by countless people and ending up dead? In the end, he had spent a lot of effort to find Azura, who was in the state of a wandering soul and only knew how to kill. He had used all kinds of methods to barely raise this Azura. Borrowing the power of Azura, he had gathered a pool of blood, which contained the flesh and blood power of countless powerhouses. In addition to his special method, when the blood amber was finally condensed, it was just right for him to use. Not only could it greatly increase his strength, but it could also help him suppress the boiling blood in his body. Originally, the path that blood demons took contained extremely powerful destructive power. Although their combat strength was extremely powerful, they often couldn't control their nature. How many methods had he used to achieve this? How many years had he spent to slowly lay out the plan and build it? Now you want to easily dismiss me by saying that you've used it. I haven't even figured out how to use it. The blood amber was the most perfect thing that he had created, and it was also the most suitable for him. The others, without exception, all had different side effects. Only the power of Azura could suppress the explosive power in the blood. In the end, after countless years of accumulation, it could slowly be transformed into such a powerful energy crystal. Although it didn't look good, it was indeed the most perfect work. The reason why he hadn't taken the blood amber was that he hadn't found a way to perfectly use its power. But who would have thought that just as he had some ideas and was about to give it a try, he turned around and found that the thing that he had painstakingly cultivated for thousands of years was gone. Even the Azura he had placed there was gone. His soul had been completely scattered, and he had disappeared without a trace. I see. Qin Yu had already heard what had happened. As for what the blood demon wanted to do with the blood amber, he wasn't interested. Although he had some sympathy, the Azura had been trapped there, who knew how many lives it had taken. It could be seen that the blood demon had completely used the flesh and blood of countless people to achieve his goal. And according to him, the Azura Blood Sea was only one of his most perfect experiments. Chapter 939. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. It was obvious that there were similar places in other places. The number of people who had died by his hand or because of him was definitely not a small number. A rain of blood. It suddenly descended on this mountain. Every drop of blood that fell on the ground turned into blood-red ice cubes. Every gust of wind brought with it a bone-piercing chill. Blood demon descend. That was when the unforeseen event happened. Suddenly, a void gate opened at the top of the mountain. The other side of the door seemed to be connected to an extremely mysterious space. It was as if something that could destroy heaven and earth was about to come out from that door. A powerful aura enveloped the entire mountain peak. The snow that had accumulated on the mountain peak all year round fell in large patches. It landed on the ground with a rumble. A blood-red palm suddenly rose into the sky. It was about to land on the mountain peak. The palm that suddenly appeared was extremely vast and wide. It was comparable to half of the mountain peak. You want to take my life with just a palm? You think too highly of yourself. He didn't even reveal his clone completely. A golden light flashed, and the huge palm was directly slapped back. Seeing this, the worry in Shualan's eyes faded slightly. The power of the palm just now was extremely vast. The aura attached to it was also extremely terrifying. However, even such a powerful palm was easily slapped back by Qinyu. The blood demon had expected that Qinyu might not be so simple, but he didn't expect him to be so complicated. Just now, he had directly summoned the real blood demon. Although he was called the blood demon, it was only a code name. Everyone who was of the same lineage as him was respectfully called the blood demon ancestor. However, the real blood demon's palm strike had been so casually deflected. Even the blood demon himself couldn't guarantee that he could do it so easily. Even if it was just a palm, it wasn't something that anyone could easily resist. As he became more agitated, the surrounding heaven and earth seemed to be affected by him. The rain became heavier. Drops of blood-red rain fell on the ground. It dyed the entire icy blue mountain peak into the color of blood. A strong gust of wind rose, and even a small tornado was formed. Qinyu directly broke through the myriad of techniques with his brute force. The huge tornado that had yet to take shape was scattered on the spot. It was as if he had just gently waved away a wisp of cool breeze. The blood demon ancestor had just poured his heart's blood into it when he suffered such a heavy blow. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He spat out a mouthful of blood like an arrow. It was shot 10 meters away. Thus, he gave up on all his tricks and went into battle himself. The bodies of the blood devils of each generation could not be considered very strong. The most powerful thing was still the various unfathomable methods. He shook his wide sleeves, and suddenly, a pile of deep white bones came out. These deep white bones jumped up on their own and pieced together. Soon, new meridians and flesh grew out. Even the outer layer of skin. When it fully matured, it would become another blood demon ancestor. Let's see if you can tell which one is me. Since those methods are useless against you, I must find your true weakness. The two blood demon ancestors who looked exactly the same spoke at the same time. Then, with a flash of their figures, they switched positions back and forth several times. It was already difficult to distinguish between the real and the fake. At this moment, it was even more impossible to determine which one was the real blood demon ancestor with the naked eye. Even the auras of the two blood demon ancestors were exactly the same. Just based on their auras, it was impossible to determine which one was real and which one was fake. This is something that I have carefully nurtured for a long time. I used many failed products and a drop of my own heart's blood to create a puppet that is exactly the same as me. It can even have a portion of my power. Therefore, I can guarantee that no one in this world can tell which one is real and which one is fake. Even if I am at the true God realm, I think that I can use this method to be invincible. Two people who looked exactly the same. At the same time, they said the exact same words and made the exact same sounds. It sounded really noisy. It was very annoying. To Qinyu, was it that important to know which one was real and which one was fake? Instead of trying to determine which one was real and which one was fake, they might quickly turn around and mix together, flashing back and forth. It was dazzling. He might as well attack directly. He would beat both of them down. If he could not tell which one was real and which one was fake, he would kill both of them together. Then, he would not have so many worries. Only a fool would choose to slowly and carefully choose at this time. He might even fall into a dilemma and be unable to extricate himself. Why should he put the initiative in the hands of the enemy? Drinking Dragon Sword. It's a good opportunity to see if you are more powerful or if the Dragon Clan is more powerful. Logically speaking, you have already reached the peak of the Holy King realm. No matter what, you should be more powerful than the Dragon Clan, which is one level lower. With one slash, blood splattered everywhere. And this smear of blood was extremely inconspicuous in this sky full of snow and rain. If one did not look carefully, they would not even be able to tell. After all, this blood had completely merged with the blood rain. After the head was chopped off, the body could still move slightly. In the end, the flesh and blood of the body completely turned into blood water, leaving only the ghastly white bones. It kept trying to escape. It used its fastest speed to turn into a stream of light, wanting to return to the blood demon ancestor's side. But no matter how fast this ghastly white bone was, it was just a dead object. The dragon soul directly captured this fellow in a few days. A bone that could move on its own, and it could also be used to create an identical clone. Perhaps it would have some value. He could not let it go back and let the blood demon ancestor become even more powerful. At this moment, there was no such thing as a clone, nor was there any such thing as being real or fake. With one slash. Whether it was real or fake was already clear at a glance. At this moment, the blood demon ancestor had already lost a lot. Although he did not have any injuries on his body. However, they were also running away in a panic. It was not that he had more life-saving methods. At this moment, the one who was beheaded was not just a substitute, but himself. If he did not run now, when would he run? But not long after he ran out. He suddenly felt that his speed seemed to have stopped. Then, he watched as Qin Yu slowly walked over. He directly slapped her until she completely lost consciousness. Xuelan looked around and saw that it was a world of bright red everywhere. She could not help but frown slightly. Finally, she waved her jade-like hand. An invisible force completely dispersed the snow, rain, and wind that filled the sky. Chapter 940. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Thick dark clouds began to gather in the sky, and it started to drizzle. Until all the blood red on the ground was completely washed away. Then she waved her hand again. She drove the dark clouds to other places. The whole mountain returned to its initial coldness. It was as if the previous battle had never happened. You all did a lot of things. Now it seems that only I have nothing to do. So I waved my hand to deal with the aftermath. Xuelan smiled sweetly. Following her actions, even the corpses on the ground disappeared. There wasn't even a trace of the smell of blood left in the air. But the whole mountain wasn't damaged at all. She washed it clean and didn't leave any traces. To do this in a short time, she had to reach the peak of control. Every small detail had to be thought over and over again, and she had to grasp it accurately. There couldn't be the slightest mistake. Only then could he have completed all of this in such a short period of time. Qin Yu looked at everything in front of him that had returned to normal. Suddenly, his fingers moved gently. It seemed that he was holding something in his hand. And the dark clouds in the sky also changed with his movements. Not long after. Suddenly, snowflakes began to fall like goose feathers. Every snowflake was so delicate that it could be seen. It landed on an ice-blue mountain peak, like the best goose down. It looked unbelievably soft. Xuelan's eyes flashed with surprise. She gently caught a snowflake with her jade-like fingers. Looking at the crystal-clear snowflake slowly melting into water droplets in her palm, she couldn't help but feel a little regretful. But in the next moment, the snowflakes that were originally falling suddenly gathered together. First, it condensed into a beautiful white snowball. Then this big snowball that was as tall as a person kept changing. When the wind and snow completely disappeared, not only was there a thick layer of snow on the ground, and a person made of white snow also appeared on the mountain peak. A little red lips seemed to be the only color in the world. The person formed by the white snow looked cold and precious, with an unattainable holy aura. But when looking at the small snowflake in the palm of her hand, however, she was gentle and pleasantly surprised. She was so beautiful that one couldn't take their eyes off her. Without any doubt, Xuelan was sure that the person was her. The most miraculous thing was that the snowflake in her palm could actually be seen clearly. This was a small detail. It was enough to demonstrate Qin Yu's heaven-defying control. The two looked at each other and couldn't help but smile. Let's go. Didn't you say that you found traces of Kanshue Shenron last time? Since we've dealt with that little tale behind us, it's time for us to set off. Shualan hadn't traveled all over the world. But he also knew that there were many things in this world. Kanshue Shenron was one of the 9 legendary elemental dragons. This was not the self-proclaimed title of the dark dragon god. It was the real and only Shenron in the world. There were a total of 9 elements in the world, and they were the foundation of the world. Every major element had a supreme one, which was Shenron, which had existed since the beginning of the world. Through the changes of time, the dragon clan had been prosperous and declined. Sometimes, they were even on the verge of extinction. But the dragon god had always been hiding in the dark, unknown to everyone. Only when the dragon clan was in danger of extinction would he take the initiative to show up, just to protect the dragon clan's habitat. For them, there was no concept of heirs or inheritance. Because all the dragon clan in this world were their descendants. Such Shenron had existed since the emergence of the world. Almost every one of them had the power to create and change the world. Creating a world was more than 100 times harder than destroying a world. With the power of creation, the power of destruction was more powerful and had more variability. And every Shenron. They all had the power to change the development of the world. In the 9 worlds, there were 9 Shenron guarding each other. The traces of Kanshue Shenron are in the deepest part of the north. There's only ice and snow over there for thousands of miles. Even in the hot season, it's still a vast sea with countless icebergs and continents floating on it. I once heard that there seemed to be relics related to the Kanshue true dragon there. But it was protected by a group of local aborigines and no one was allowed to approach it. They were even born with great power and were extremely good at swimming, so in the end, no one found the relics of the Kanshue true dragon. According to this statement, it was already the most appropriate and realistic of all the statements. Shualan didn't deliberately remember at that time, and now there weren't many details that she could think of. However, this was already enough. It had given them an accurate direction to take in the future. All the way to the north, it got colder and colder. Originally, they could see some prosperous cities in the periphery. Among them, there were many powerful practitioners. But when they got inside, they couldn't see anything. All they could see was a vast expanse of white fog. Occasionally, they would see a few living creatures that could move, but they were all white bears and snow rabbits. They were the only ones who could endure the cold air here and live a comfortable life. The deeper they went, what they could see was even less. Until they stepped into the real barren land, only some powerful existences would choose to walk here. If one didn't have great strength, it would be extremely difficult to survive here. Here, not to mention this piece of green. Within a radius of 1,000 miles, they might not even find a living creature that could move. Everything around them was white. They thought that the journey would be so peaceful, but this peace was finally broken. White snow was flying. For some reason, there was a great movement in front of them. Dodge. Qin Yu quickly left the original place with Shualan. And the place where they were just now had a deep crack at this time. The ice here was more than 10 meters thick, but such a hard ice was still hit by this powerful force, and the crack spread hundreds of miles away. Countless ferocious fish that had been sealed under the ice jumped out of the water. They crossed the thick ice and fell directly on the ice, smashing a pit that was neither deep nor shallow. Then, countless ferocious big fish began to crash into this crack. Each of them had a mouth full of sharp teeth. With a light bite, the incomparably hard ice was quickly broken into pieces under its sharp teeth. Qin Yu didn't care about these big fish that rushed out of the water. The air here was too cold. Even if these big fish were extremely destructive, they would soon be frozen again. Chapter 941. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Countless snowy mountains collapsed, and the thick layer of ice shattered. Everything indicated that there was a battle going on in front of them. And it had already reached its climax. But that was also where they had to go in the end. The cold wind blew. But the man and the beast were extremely thin. The white bear had a thin layer of fur on its body. On the other hand, the pale-skinned muscular man was topless. "I won't let you go today, you've already come twice. I said there won't be a third time, but you didn't listen," The white bear was a little anxious and kept growling threateningly. Its heavy bear paw landed on the ice. There was a claw mark that was neither too big nor too small. It was not doubtful that if it used a little strength, the ice under its feet would shatter inch by inch. It was also because of this that the human men didn't have the upper hand against him at all. Because he had to take care of the people behind him. If all the ice around them were to break, they would have no place to stay. He could not help but warn again. This is the last time I'm reminding you. Leave this place quickly. This is not a place you should be. Or else, even if I have to risk my life, I'll take you down with me. He had an extreme solution to solve all of this. It could solve the threat of the white bear and protect the people behind him. But it would cost him his life. Just as the two sides tacitly stopped fighting, the atmosphere was still arrogant and domineering, as if the final path of life and death would be ignited soon. At this moment, a figure appeared not far away. And it was approaching at a steady pace. Whether it was the white bear or the pale human man, they were both powerhouses with extremely sharp senses. During the battle just now, they did not notice the movements around them. Now that the person had appeared in their sight, they naturally looked over together. Qin Yu did not seem to be under any pressure. Xuelan cultivated the path of the great oblivion. She did not care about anything in this world. To her, there was only one person in this world who was an exception. But other than him, everything else was just a fleeting cloud. She approached and left hurriedly. Fleeting clouds. Whether he lived or died, it had nothing to do with her. The distance between them was getting closer and closer. The white bear wanted to attack, but it retreated. Its keen intuition told it that the people in front of it were not to be trifled with. As long as one stared at them, one would be able to see through them and see the countless powerful existences in the ancient void. After regaining his senses, he was unwilling to leave so easily. However, he didn't have the slightest bit of malice towards the person who suddenly appeared. They even took the initiative to open up a path for him. This made the pale human male feel very surprised. Previously, no matter what he said, this beast had a stubborn look on his face. But now, in the face of this suspicious person who had suddenly appeared, they were willing to make way for him. He couldn't care less about cultivation realms. Just this point alone was enough for him to see hope. I'm sorry, but I want you to fight with me and help me defeat this white bear. Its destructive power is too great. I've been stuck here for a long time by myself. And this bastard actually gave in to you. As long as you are by my side, I will definitely be able to subdue this bastard in a short period of time. If it was a kind persuasion, perhaps he would agree. But his tone was clearly unquestionable. Qin Yu just stood by and watched the show. Since it had nothing to do with him, he was just a passerby. Why should he interfere? Anyway, the white bear had already sensibly made way for them. It was easy for them to leave if they wanted to. On the other hand, the pale man was now almost forced to a dead end. No matter what the final result was, he had to compromise. Otherwise, he couldn't see any hope. Those who were able to survive in such a dangerous place were not kind-hearted people. Seeing that Qin Yu was indifferent, the pale man simply attacked the white bear directly. By Zi force. Feng Yang rock. The man blocked the white bear while attacking. There was no other way out. If the white bear wanted to fight back, it had to attack Qin Yu and the others. There was no way to avoid it. Just as the crisis was about to befall it, the white bear didn't care about its intuition and directly counterattacked with all its strength. Suddenly, it stood up and roared. Its vigorous figure shuttled through the attacks. According to the pale man's thoughts, it went toward Qin Yu and the others. Xuelan was the first to bear the brunt of the huge impact. All of this happened too quickly, and the white bear was extremely powerful. Although it looked strong, its flexibility and speed were also very amazing. Before the white bear was about to touch Xuelan, Qin Yu's figure flashed past. He tapped the tip of his foot lightly. He directly moved to another place without leaving a trace. Compared to other places, the terrain here was higher and safer. Lying in the warm embrace, Xuelan's face was inadvertently pink. Even though she had been gently put down, she still couldn't recover for a long time. She is mine. No one can touch her. Those who dare to touch her will die without a doubt. So whether it was the white bear or the pale man, he was not going to let any of them go. Since they had to involve an innocent passerby like him, then they should pay the corresponding price. They should pay the price for what they had done. The white bear's keen intuition made it sense danger. It even put its old enemy aside and focused on facing this person who had suddenly appeared and brought it a strong sense of crisis. The pale man saw Qin use casual movements and knew that things were not good. This person who had suddenly appeared was more powerful than he had imagined. If Qin Yu stood on top and wanted to take advantage of the situation, he couldn't guarantee that he could withstand it. Isn't that fairy not injured? It's just a small accident. As soon as the pale man finished speaking, then, he felt a strong pressure coming at him. He was directly slapped into the ice. It took him a lot of effort to get up. But at this time, his body was covered with wounds. His breath became weak and he was in a mess. The white bear took the lead to attack. It still wanted to use its dexterity to fight hand-to-hand. But as soon as it got into a familiar posture, it was easily knocked down. All of its agility and speed were unable to withstand a single blow from Qin Yu. After that, even if it changed several angles to attack, the result was the same. All of them ended in failure. Not a single one was successful. Do you know your mistake? The white bear was just an animal after all. It was completely enraged and felt deep fear. It could only respond with a weak growl.